that may need help, there is help available. There are friends, there are family, there are resources in town. Nobody's ever alone. And I think that we need to constantly remind ourselves of that.
Yes. And to our first responders who were unshakable and offering comfort to each other and the community, it was really moving to see.
And Mr. Dean, I'd like to thank you and Assistant Town Manager Roy for continuing to reach out to both departments. I'd like to acknowledge both Chief Wilking and Assistant Chief Pizon, Chief Poulin and Deputy Chief McCain, who really kept their finger on the pulse of their staff to make sure that their staff had their resources available. And I really appreciate, Chief, what you and Chief Poulin did, and thank you, Mr. Dean, for keeping tabs and keeping the Select Board updated.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wish to comment? Okay. Thank you again, Anna. Moving on, we have a recognition this evening. The Public Works Department commenced an Employee of the Quarter program 23 years ago in 1999. And this quarter's recipient is from the wastewater treatment plan, and I'm happy to announce that the DPW Employee of the Quarter is going to Chris Goodwin. For those that don't know Chris has been instrumental in the workings of the wastewater treatment plant over the summer. He came in early, often stayed late, came in on weekends, and really made sure that everything was working as it should, particularly given the openings in that department. Chris has proven himself to be a leader within the department. He's proven himself to be a mentor. He's encouraged his staff to seek other licenses and further their education so that they can further their career. He's definitely one of our many bright spots in the DPW, and I think he is absolutely deserving of this. So congratulations, Chris, on this award. Mr. Dean, did you want to comment?
I would just say that you don't always see the people up front and center. They're not necessarily in your face all the time, and Chris is just one of those stars behind the scenes that does so much at our wastewater facility and has worked so hard and has put in extra hours. And it's a complex system that we run, and he helps make it look easy, and he really does a great job. And as stated here, he's a great influence on others in the department as well. So we're glad to have him, and we're lucky to have him.
Terrific, thank you. Moving on, we have the approval of our minutes from the December 5th, 2022 Select Board meeting. I would first ask if there are any amendments or revisions to the minutes. Okay, and seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the Exeter Select Board regular meeting minutes of December 5th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. The next next agenda item, we have a resignation to consider this evening. Kristen Osterwood, who is one of the original members of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, has tendered her resignation due to family and other work commitments. Kristen served as the clerk for almost the entire time that she served. As the Select Board rep to the committee since its implementation, I can say that Kristen had many, many good ideas and really did a wonderful job with the minutes during her time as clerk. So we understand, but we regret that we'll be losing a very valuable committee member. So I would entertain a motion to accept the resignation of Kristen Osterwood from the Sustainability Advisory Committee.
So moved with thanks.
Second with thanks.
Okay, and any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0, and again, we thank Kristen. This creates a full-time permanent opening on the Sustainability Advisory Committee, so if we could recruit somebody to come in and fill that seat, that would be great. And then I would ask the board to consider the appointment of Mr. Nicholas Norden to the Rec Advisory Board. This term would be to expire April 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0, and we thank Mr. Norden for his volunteer. Okay, we're going to jump into our discussion items. We have a busy evening ahead of us, so our first order of business this evening is to accept the Public Works Department review and recommendation
Totally out of order.
for the chemical bids for 2023. Mr. Dean, for the sake of brevity but thoroughness, given the fact that we're voting roll call, is it acceptable if I make one motion encompassing all of this information?
Yes, as long as the companies are identified in the motion and the price per unit that they've offered their product at.
Okay, is that acceptable to the board?
Yes.
Yes,
Try to
but
roll
Mr.
this.
Chair, I
Yes.
would ask you also read the increase from 2022. I think that's important for people to understand that chemicals are going up.
I would agree. Let me get to that page. Do you want that as part of the motion or just
Yeah, you
informational?
can do it. Just do the number that they provided and then how much the increase is for each one.
Okay.
Like do one company and their bid. And,
Yep.
you know.
All right, so let's try to do this all at one time. So for bid item number 1, for the sodium hypochlorite, the recommendation, I move to award bid number 1 to Univar Solutions of Morrisville, Pennsylvania, at a unit price of $2.592 per gallon, which is an increase of 0.7870 from 2022.
Yeah, go on.
Bid item number 2 to be awarded to George S. Coyne Chemical Company, Inc. for activated carbon at $2.1929 per pound, which is an increase of 0.4957 from 2022. Bid item number 3 for potassium permanganate to Univar Solutions at $2.4800 per pound, which is an increase of 0.4650 from 2022. And finally, bid item number 4 to Borden and Remington for sodium hydroxide at 2.0831 per gallon, which is an increase of 0.5907 from 2022.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone. Okay, next on our agenda, we have the third reading of the town ordinance for single-use plastics. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Blanchard.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. The public hearing is open. And Kristen, did you have a presentation to present before public hearing, or do you want to do it after?
Maybe before.
Okay. Then we're ready when you are.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's not visible on the screen, so I'm not sure. Bob, could you come back out?
Turn back on.
Oh, it's just dark. We could turn the lights off.
You want to do that?
I think it's waking up. Okay. Okay, thank you all. This is the third reading for the proposed ordinance of single-use plastics, relevant to single-use plastics on town property. Next slide, please. At the last Select Board meeting, there were several items that you tasked the Sustainability Committee and myself with. One of them was modifications to the ordinance. Another was clarification on the Portsmouth policy. You asked that we quantify financial impact to Parks and Rec, and you identified some areas of outreach that you had recommended. Next slide, please. So I'll step through each of those. With regard to modifications to the ordinance, you felt that you would appreciate more details on how the policy itself would be enforced, more details on the transition plan that has been proposed for Parks and Recreation. And there was a recommendation for penalties and remedies to be changed to an educational approach. So I'll step through those. Next slide. So again, this is the draft ordinance. I'll read the pertinent points and leave the definitions to our past readings. This is the proposed ordinance for the distribution of single-use plastic bags, food service products, and polystyrene food containers on town property. The purpose of this ordinance, the town of Exeter recognizes that limiting the distribution and subsequent disposal of single-use plastics through reduction is necessary to protect human health, to preserve the natural environment, and to promote sustainable and ethical practices regarding material waste. Next slide. That's another slide of definitions that we can go to if there's questions. Okay, so this is the crux of the ordinance. Distribution of single-use plastics on town property. No person shall distribute a prohibited single-use disposable item at any town facility, town property, town-managed or sponsored event, or activity authorized through special permits issued under the authority of the Exeter Select Board, unless otherwise allowed under exceptions. Those prohibited single-use disposables are single-use plastic bags, single-use plastic food service products, single-use polystyrene containers. There are some product exemptions, and they include reusable bags, single-use compostable food service products, packaging material required for food safety reasons, added at the site of business or processing facility. Examples include wrapping around meat, seafood, lettuce mix, or other perishables. Products where alternatives to prohibited items do not exist until an alternative is identified. Next slide, please. We also included some organizational exemptions, and this is where some modifications have been added since the last reading, and those are identified on the slide in red. All town departments, vendors may distribute their remaining inventory for 9 months following policy adoption. There's an organizational exception for items used by emergency responders or human service nonprofit organizations. Prohibited single-use containers brought by staff or customers themselves are exempt. And then Exeter Parks and Rec Department will work with the Sustainability Committee to develop a transition plan. We added the text, implementing acceptable alternatives as they are identified with an objective of meeting financial and sustainability goals. 2405, we made some modifications. It now reads oversight and enforcement instead of penalties and remedies. And it says, subject to the exceptions above, the following shall apply. Item 1, reports of non-compliance with this ordinance will be directed to the Conservation and Sustainability Planner, who will work with the permittee or town department to find replacement products. If reasonable replacements have been identified but infractions continue, the town considers this a violation of this ordinance and written warning will be issued. Town departments will meet with the town manager and conservation and sustainability planners to seek alternative solutions to achieve compliance with this ordinance. And then the third and final item has not been changed. That is, upon second or subsequent infraction of this ordinance, the town interprets this as a direct violation of the vendor permit and cause for refusal to approve the use permit. It does not have language in there to rescind the existing permit, just refusal for a future permit. Next slide, please. The other item that you asked for clarification was how does we had stated that this policy was initially modeled after what Portsmouth has developed. And so you asked for clarification on how Portsmouth's policy is implemented. Their policy was adopted in 2019. In 2020, there was a clarification that had language that almost made it seem like it was recommended and not required. But I will tell you that I spoke with Kristen Shaw, and she's the deputy health officer. And she said it absolutely is an ordinance on the book. It is enforceable. It's her duty to enforce it. And my interpretation, though I did not directly ask her this, is the variation that we're seeing across Parks and Rec or other entities in terms of still using plastics is a matter of follow-up enforcement or lack thereof. It's not that it's a permitted activity or that those organizations are exempt. She did clearly state that Parks and Rec was not exempt. Okay, so that's the Portsmouth policy, and I'm happy to go into more details.
Can I ask a quick question? Because we're interchanging. Is it a policy or is it an ordinance? Because you've used both words to describe it. It's adopted as a city ordinance, and then they took an action that's a city policy. Okay.
Or I think it's a city council policy is how it's stated. So my read of that, and I probably should have brought the text with me, and I can go get it if it's helpful, but my read of that is if you read through the different sections, it does identify things like pass-through costs, meaning it clarifies what vendors could charge for individual items. Should they want a bag and they didn't bring a bag with them, the vendors could charge an additional $10. It clarifies what straws are allowed. It clarifies things like that. So I think my interpretation, and this is backed up by what Kristen Shaw had said, is it was to clarify the ordinance and how to implement it.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the next item that I'll talk through was quantifying financial impacts to Park and Rec and provide specifics on how much implementation could cost them. So this might get a little numbersy, and I do apologize for that. I've tried to simplify it as much as possible, but next slide, please. What I've done was, given some of the comments that I've heard in terms of desire and request, things like a reusable water bottle option, so camp attendees or visitors could reclose the water. A desire to still continue to have Gatorade, to keep water and Gatorade not at a higher price than soda, so that kids won't opt for soda over Gatorade or water. And so and then another comment I had was, what about sponsorship? Is there a way that sponsorship could help offset those costs? So I have a whole slew of options that I've analyzed, but I'll just present a handful of them tonight, and these I think are probably the best at painting the picture of what the impact will be, based on the information I've been given. Okay, so the first scenario is full conversion. The areas that Parks and Rec had identified being a challenge to convert from were bottled water and Gatorade. And so that's where we focused our efforts. Greg had said that he has no concerns over switching other products. So currently, Parks and Rec sells 1,500 units of bottled water based on the data Greg gave, and 800 units of Gatorade. And last year brought in a profit from those sales of just over $2,300. So the first scenario that I'll walk you through is, I guess I'll call it the big picture hard case scenario, right? And so this is full conversion. Hang on one sec.
Sure.
A lot of people have not seen aluminum bottled water, so one vendor provided some of those to me, and that you can pass along. So the first scenario is an aluminum bottled water. This one is sourced through Open Water, that's the brand. And they also have a canned water source. So this first scenario is Open Water for the water bottle replacement, and then the Gatorade replacement would involve units of Open Water in the aluminum bottle, plus powdered Gatorade. Okay, and so one of the challenges is in terms of units, there are certain units that you need to buy to get a certain price point. And so in this scenario, 2880 units is what Parks and Rec would need to buy in order to adopt this scenario, even though they only need 2,300 units. They come in pallets. Implementing that straight would mean that they would have a loss in current income, a loss of they would sell those units and be negative $199.20. In comparison to their current income that was presented, they would be negative $2,583.20. So in other words, that would put them $2,583 under last year's profit, okay? But because they're sold in larger quantities, there would be 580 surplus units, right? Because they only needed 2,300. They do have an opportunity there, perhaps at other Parks and Rec events or other setups, to sell those surplus units. If they sold them at $1.50 each, they could have a profit of $870. That still puts them $1,713 under last year's profit. If they sold them at $2.50, that would be an income of $1,450, which puts them $1,133 under last year's profit, right? It's hard to beat 12 cents a bottle. Okay, so let's go to some of the other alternatives. There's also a product, and I don't have a sample of this, cartoned water. This does come with a reclosable top. I just have a photo because not everyone's familiar with what that looks like. You may have seen boxed water in other restaurants in town. And then individual packets of powdered Gatorade. So the theory is, just like the last one, they'd open the bottle of water, dump the Gatorade in. Okay, so this is no price increase. So I'll follow the same pattern. Our target profit was $23.84. That's what Parks and Rec makes off of the concession stand selling water and Gatorade based on last year's numbers. Using this Flow product, that's the brand. It's distributed through Polar, plus powdered Gatorade, and sorry, that's a mistake. It should say Flow cartons. They could implement that and be net positive at $4.92 $492. That's all the profit they would make, which would still put them $18.92 under last year's income. For this, you can buy this in smaller quantities, so those surplus 100 units, if they sold them, let's just skip to the bottom line, they would be $17.42 behind last year's profit. If they sold them at $2.50 a unit, they'd be $16.42 behind last year's income. Go ahead. Okay, so I did also look to see at what price increase we could start to see some positive traction. And so this is, again, the open water, the product that I passed around, and powdered Gatorade. This is being sold at $1.50 for each. Again, we are limited on the larger quantity, but if they raised prices for 50 cents, that would be $950.80 of income, still in the whole $14.33 from last year. If they sold the surplus units at $870, they would be in the hole from last year by $563. Okay, if they sold them at $2.50 at other events outside of the concession stand and camp, they have the potential to have a profit of $14.50, which is $16, which I call break even from last year's income, right? It's $16. Next scenario. And I will say, so right now, water, Gatorade, and David can speak to this better than I can, but based on what's presented on the town's website, all of those are sold at the same prices. And so there could be an option, and I didn't do this because I don't know the income from soda sales, but there could be an option to raise, say, soda sales in lieu of water. Okay. This is the sponsorship scenario, Chameleon water bottles and powdered Gatorade. This scenario requires converting only a portion of the Gatorade. Because you buy this in a fixed unit, you would have to buy quite a bit surplus in order to replace both the bottle and the plastic Gatorade. But this could be a customized water bottle. So let's step through this scenario. So it could be, we could get, 6 sponsors, have a label represent 6 different names, and this is how it would play out. Because you buy this in quantities of 1,712 units. These are bizarre, but this is how they come. I didn't make the rules. This would still remain using 588 plastic Gatorade bottles. But you could have a profit of $1,272, which is $1,100 behind last year. With the sponsor offset, you could have a net positive gain of $88. Those sponsors are just picked out of the air. I picked 6 sponsors at $200, but obviously they could source it any way they feel is appropriate. Okay. The final scenario that I'll present tonight is partial conversion with no price increase. And this is using the can product that I passed around. This does not meet the objective of being able to reuse close up the can. And also you can't really open a can and dump the powder in there. So this relies on just replacing the water, partial conversion, and doing status quo with Gatorade. Next slide. Okay, so doing so, they would be 2601 positive, which is $217 over last year's profit, and they would still have 600 units remaining. And with those 600, if they sold them at $1, they could be 817 above last year. If they sold them at $1.50, they could be 1,117. But again, that's still using the 800 Gatorade bottles, but that's full conversion of all of the water. Next slide. So that was a lot of numbers, and so I thought I'd step through just the kind of the summary from profit, where they fall out. This is a little bit different from the slide that I showed you in your packet because I was trying to show you the span of the numbers. But I'll just do bottom line, assuming that they're able to sell those surplus units at the highest amount that I listed. Full conversion, it would be a loss of profit of $1,133. That's using the aluminum, reclosable water bottle and powdered Gatorade. Full conversion, that was a no increase in cost. Full conversion, this is using the Flow carton, water carton. It is also reclosable. That would be a profit loss of $1,600. Full conversion, 50-cent increase. There's a potential of breaking even essentially. Partial conversion, still having 588 plastic units would be a profit gain of $88. If they only replaced water, it would be a profit gain of $1,117. Okay. Can you go back one sec? Sorry, I should have summarized that a little bit. So I guess my intention for this was just to put the numbers out there for full disclosure. There's a multitude of scenarios that you can make and twist. I'm not Parks and Rec. I'm not the one to do that. I just wanted to do eyes wide open and say these are the numbers that we're talking about.
Could I ask a question for
yeah.
point of clarification here? The units that are left,
Yes.
okay. So when Parks and Rec gave us their bottom line number, that was their net profit. That already took into consideration the payroll for the snack shack, right? So when you give us numbers to sell the remaining units for a profit, does that take into consideration what it would cost
No,
to put
in my
somebody
mind,
to do that job?
sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. In my mind, that would be at events, right? We didn't want Parks, or the theory that I was told was Parks and Rec, it wasn't palatable to raise the price at the snack shack or for the campers.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be at things like Beer and Chili Fest or some other event.
Right, but somebody from Parks and Rec would have to be there to sell them, right?
Right, which
Okay.
I assume they're at those events today.
But they don't have, we'll
I
check
don't
with
know.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah,
Do you see
again.
where I'm going with this question? I want to make sure that when we're looking at these bottom line numbers, we're taking into consideration whether or not Parks and Rec actually sells stuff other than outside the snack shack. Is that what it's called, the snack shack? Pardon me?
Concession stand.
Thank you, that's better. Not as much of a tongue twister for me. Just see where I'm going? I want to make sure our numbers are
Yep.
taking everything into consideration.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a whole host of nuances associated with operating the facility. I'm just presenting the
And we have
numbers
somebody
that
from
I'm-
Parks and Rec who's going to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to know if that was in there. Thank you.
Thank you, good question.
Okay, so bottom line is 12 cents a unit for plastic water bottles is tough to beat, right? If we wrote into the ordinance some flexibility in implementation, a timeline for support, and so there's time to work out some of these nuances, in my opinion. Okay, next slide. But at the end of the day, it's coming up with supplemental funds for about $1,200. Okay, the last item I'll step through is our efforts to increase awareness. There was some direct, next slide, there were some direct meetings with different committees. After the last select board meeting, there was an article that came out in the newspaper. I did get a couple phone calls after that of people who were interested in knowing more. Some distributors contacted me, which was helpful in sourcing some of the numbers. But I thought it was a good representation of our efforts to try to work together as a team. I thought it represented, this effort as a whole pretty well. Next slide. Okay, Chris Zygmunt attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting on November 29th, and I think that was a great lesson in terms of opening our eyes for the harsh talk of what this feels like and what this is to implement. I do wish that we would have ensure it was unclear whether or not they had a copy of the ordinance based on some of the questions, but their bottom line was the impact to the revenue stream. Without a doubt, that was the largest concern that was wholeheartedly spoken about. There was also, and this I hadn't thought of, there was concern about the flexibility in the language. So we had We had flexibility to have a transition plan with Parks and Rec, and there was concern that, flexibility can go both ways. It could be flexed against Parks and Rec as much as for them, and so to me, that was, all right, we need to do a little better at working together, showing that the SAC and I are here to support them, that it's an educational approach, and I think that there's some trust factor that we need to build there, some relationship building that needs to happen, and I think we're committed to do that. The other thing that was brought up was because Parks and Rec is a seasonal operation, even though we have a 90-day grace period, when you have a seasonal operation, it kind of shortens your window to use up existing supplies. So that was a concern that was raised. And then again, it was mentioned concerns over impact to vendors at tournaments. There was a little bit of back and forth there, and I'll let David speak to that if he wishes. At the end of the day, I think the one vendor that people were concerned about was someone that they had already entered into a contract with or an agreement with, and so that'll happen within the 90-day grace period. Chris, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and just for clarity too, I think we mean a 9-month transition period, right? 9 months.
Oh, yes.
So.
Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how many times I've read these, but yes, sorry, a 9-month grace period. That was not 9-month, not 90-day. My apologies. Thank you. The next meeting we attended was the Arts and Culture Advisory Commission. This was on December 13th, and this again was pretty eye-opening. It was helpful to hear from Scott and the crew there. One issue that really set the stage was we need to work hard to inform the vendors early, right? Having them find out about it at the time that they're signing up to be a vendor is kind of too late. They need time to source the product. Responsibility of compliance. So who's responsible for compliance? So for example, if team pulls a permit from the select board and then individual vending trucks go and get a different permit from the health department to operate their vending truck, is Scott responsible to ensure that they all follow this ordinance? At that meeting, we did say, our feeling is that it would be the event coordinator, but that we can work with the health department to have information distributed to vendors that way. I did ask if it was possible to reach out directly to vendors, and I think maybe that's something that we can work out. But it might mean that some vendors are kind of not interested in that connection. There was also talk about a need for on-site public water source. I had met, and we discussed this at the last committee meeting, but I had met with the Swayze Parkway trustees, and they were supportive of exploring the installation of a water bottle refill station at the end of the Park Street sidewalk that connects to Park Street. And there are grants out there. I have a draft grant, but I have some more hoops to jump through on that. And there are other opportunities. Kristen Osterwood, who was with SAC, who you heard the resignation from, she works for Unitil, and in the past, they also offer programs, so she had suggested it might be worth reaching out to them for grants. Community grants. Okay, there was talk about education of the public on recycling, right? And so we felt that has to happen with or without this policy, but it was clarified through this process. I reached out to Jay Perkins, and his crew is willing to drop a recycle bin at town events, but there needs to be a commitment from the vendor coordinator to patrol that recycle bin to be sure it's not contaminated. Chris had a great idea of connecting with, community organizations who are looking for volunteer hours, like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, or high school volunteers, and maybe coordinating some sort of, educational activity for them that then also provides a community service for us. There was also a concern, so the vending the food truck community or vendors, it's a tough business, and And there was a concern that any change in process might turn them away due to added complexity. If Exeter has another bar to jump over, maybe they'll go and take their vending to a different event. Yeah, I think that is, can you do one more?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So I hope that addresses your concerns. I'm happy to talk through any questions. There's members of the Sustainability Committee here, or,
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
yeah.
So if we have any questions for Kristen, we could ask them now or wait till we deliberate as a board, but I do want to give the option. We have, you referenced Parks and Rec and the Rec Advisory Board. I know we have Mr. Tovey here that would be representing both. I know we have representatives from the Arts and Culture Commission. Where you've cited meetings with them, I'd like to give them an opportunity to come to the podium, should they wish. Mr. Tovey, we'd start with you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also have a presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and try and get that set up, or if Bob needs to come out.
Okay.
I may need some of that.
Okay.
Oh, goodness.
All right. So a little presentation from the Parks and Rec Department. Again, David Tovey, Assistant Director for Exeter Parks and Recreation. And if you would, please, next slide. So what would be impacted by the single-use ban? The three main subjects that would be affected are our concession and pool operations, special events, and the recreation revolving fund. As it was mentioned, concession and pool operates, sorry, it wasn't mentioned just yet, but the concession and pool operates at a loss each year. We will need to review the impact of this ban on pool operations. Just to clarify too, the concession stand does make a profit each year, but as we'll see at a later slide, municipal pools do not make money. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Special events, we host many special events throughout the year. For example, we do hand out plastic water bottles to the Exeter Brass Band on those hot summer nights. We have the Sweetheart Stands coming up in February. We'll have light refreshments at that as well. We just had our holiday block party where we also had refreshments at that. And at these special events, we usually do not charge for the event itself or for refreshments and things like that. The Recreation Revolving Fund, all of our programs are self-sufficient. So with this band, as Kristen mentioned, one of the options would be to offset some of those would be to pass along the added costs onto the participants. It would also require the department to look into additional funding or alternative funding to help offset some of those increased costs. Next slide, please. So here's just a little more of a deep dive review into pool operations. So as I mentioned, municipal pools do not make money. Our pool, the Daniel R. Haley pool, is no different. It's been losing money for a long time, and we've been seeing it more so recently due to inflation, higher staff salaries, the price of chemicals and general maintenance. This past summer, the pool operated at a loss of $20,977.94. Concession operations, however, that's usually the bright side of things when it comes to pool and concessions. We sell a lot of water. It was 1,500 bottles or so last summer. just under that for Gatorade, a lot of soda, ice cream, and we have other hot food items. The concession stand also takes admissions to the pool. And this past summer, the concession stand ran at a profit of $4,340.16, which is then used to offset those pool losses. And all of that goes into the revolving fund. So again, other programs that make money, like summer camp, help offset those pool losses. So the single-use plastic sales, it's an essential revenue source for the concession stand. Last year, we sold 1,500 bottles of water, 783 bottles of Gatorade, which, according to this, came to a profit of $1,859.97. Those are a little bit different than what Kristen's. She actually had a much better number, so I hope that's the correct one. But again, it is a big part of our revenue source and helps our bottom line quite a bit. So a reduction of our revenue will ultimately reduce the profit of concession stand, which would increase the gap of offset to the pool operations. Next slide, please. There are unknowns, many unknowns still when it comes to the implementation of this ordinance. Will the customers buy canned or boxed water? Can we find an alternative solution for both Gatorade and water that is affordable? Will customers buy empty water bottles to use at our water filling stations? And how much water will be consumed from the water filling stations that we will be implementing in 2023 in all of our parks? We already have adopted a built-in increased cost of water at these filling stations, and this cost is not yet known. Next slide, please. Just a little timeline to show the Exeter Parks and Rec's sustainability efforts to date. So in 2018, we implemented paper cups instead of styrofoam for ice cream in the concession stand. Also in 2018, we eliminated the use of plastic straws. In 2021, we implemented compostable sample cups and compostable spoons at the powder keg. This year, we started installation of water filling stations and also water bubblers in our parks. And in 2023, we'll be implementing compostable spoons at the concession. We'll also be going back to water bottles for campers, which we did pre-COVID. We haven't done it since because of a lot of the COVID policies, but we'll be bringing those back to help reduce single-use plastic, and we'll also be rolling out our athletic equipment recycling program as well. Next slide, please. So this is our recommendation to delay the implementation of the ordinance until a comprehensive study on the impact to parks and recreation can be completed and understood and reported to the Rec Advisory Board and Select Board. And I just want to say, Kristen and the SAC did a great job with their presentation tonight. So this was made before we got to see that. So, but great job at some of those financial numbers and some of the homework that you guys had. So if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer those for you. Or
Could I just follow up with my question that I had for Kristen?
Yep.
Other than the concession stand, does Parks and Rec sell product anywhere else? For the Chili Fest, for example?
We do not. The Chili Fest is a one-ticketed item. We have vendors there, like food trucks selling food
you're not
and
one of them.
beverages. We're not a vendor at the, or special other events and sporting events and things like that.
I have a
So follow up to yours, because that was a good question. When you, if you buy in bulk, as was proposed, and one of the options was to then take the extra or the excess bottles, cans, packages of Gatorade, and then sell them at other events. What you're saying is that you don't have other events at which you actually sell things, in fact, you give away the brass band, the dance, so forth and so on. So this is really the only place that you sell product, is that correct?
That's correct, currently, yes.
So that means that what they would give away in the plastic bottles, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming for a moment here, those products, if say, for example, we bought those bottled waters in the cans, that's what would be given to the brass band, because that's what you'd have on hand,
Right.
correct?
Yep.
So we have some numbers that we need to gather on what that would be. And where would we store bulk? Is it possible to store it at the garage at 10 Hampton Road?
I would have to look at some of the product requirements, like where it can and cannot be stored, but.
Okay, if there's heat
it's-
constraints or cold
Right,
constraints.
yeah, exactly,
Because
with
that would
water
be the-
freezing and all of
Yeah.
that, but, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for?
I have a ton, but I'm.
Well, when we come back to the, we'll deliberate
Yeah.
from the board, but
Yeah,
I wanted to
could-
give, does the Arts and Culture Commission, because you were brought up, and then we'll open it to the public?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chovy.
Thank you.
We may bring you back. And just for the record, if you could identify yourselves.
Scott Ruffner, 11 Hall Place. I'm Vice Chair of the Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory Commission and the Director of Team.
I'm Marissa Vitolo, 66 Front Street. I am the chair of the Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory Committee.
I think we did deliberate for a while after the meeting, and we did come up with our official recommendation, so I think we should probably just start with that, which was we, the members of Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, unanimously voted to recommend the adoption of a Town of Exeter single-use plastics policy as pertaining to events and permits on public property in Exeter, but with the caveat that primary focus be on education and alternative solutions. I think most of our concerns were covered in the previous presentation. The one thing that came up that I specifically am concerned with who would oversee this. And, you know, when we do our events in the park, I mean, we're kind of in over our head as is. So sort of inspecting each food vendor for plastics and utensils and whatnot. The policy that's in place, and I'm sure you guys know, but just to remind you, so we would put in the permit as the organizing vendor to James Murray 1 month prior, and then the individual vendors have until 2 weeks prior to an event to get their paperwork in, which is giving descriptions of what they're cooking, what they're serving, what they're using. So we would certainly add the language into our application for these food vendors that come to us, but to me it would be much more logical for James, who is actually issuing the food permit, and he actually comes the day of the event and literally gives everybody their sticker that they're good to go that day. So to me, that would make a lot more sense that he would be the one implementing this policy or ordinance and making sure that everybody's meeting that. We would certainly put all of this in the language of whatever we're sending out, and also proactively promote it. And as we discussed in the meeting, and I think here at the last meeting, you know, we would like to work with the Sustainability Committee and other partners to offer and promote solutions and have, you know, water available and whatnot. Yeah, so it's just, my concern is just timeline, because a lot of these vendors, they're committing and signing up a month before these events. So it's making them aware, and so that they have the opportunity to find these alternative solutions.
And then my concern also, or was all of ours, the education part of it. So if we have an event and there's a lot of trash that's created and there's just one recycling bin, and then there's someone supposed to be watching it, and they can't tell what's compostable or they can't tell what's recyclable, like it would maybe all end up in the same stream anyway, and then it would all have to go in the trash. So then it would sort of, you know, what would this look like for all the events that happen? Who's going to be doing that part? And then what happens when all of it has to go in the trash anyway? So that was one of the concerns that we were talking about a lot as well.
can I ask Scott a question?
Please.
So at your meeting, I heard you talk about your concerns with your vendors. And there was a little hesitation on that some vendors might not want Kristen Murphy to reach out directly to them. Are you willing to do that if we implement something at this level and you be proactive?
Yeah, it's very easy to put it in our application process. We have an application that goes out to the vendors, but there's a lot of language in there pertaining to setup times, closing times, other rules and regulations. So we'll certainly put it in. We'll remind them. We'll do all of that to make sure they know, because it's going to be bad for us as well if someone is showing up for the event and they don't have what they're supposed to have supplies-wise.
So proactively, I meant, so say, for instance, we implement a policy or an ordinance, would you then reach out to your vendors now? Because you said they sign up about a month before. You wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah,
When they
and we
fill out
would.
their
Yeah, we would.
application. Because that was a concern, and you have a lot of events, so I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
For the town hall gallery also, with Exeter Parks and Rec, all of that would be a part of the application, and all of that would be in there ahead of time, hopefully on the websites and everything too, where everyone could see all of that information.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for arts and culture?
That was. Julie had one.
Selectwoman Gilman does.
Thanks. I just had a question about the suggestion that the health officer be the enforcement function. And I understand your logic, but mine is that the permittee is the one organizing who is on at their event. And the health officer does have to approve the health and safety of the vendors.
Right.
But they're not permitted. It's the person, or it's the group organizing the event. And I don't feel that the health officer is the right one to police the events that have a subcontractor.
Okay. Well, we don't police dogs in the park. We don't police several other ordinances either. So that's your opinion. We're making our recommendation. So is there a question?
No, it's something for, I guess, the board to consider.
Kristen, who polices it in Portsmouth? I think you said a name earlier.
So she's the, sorry.
I'll get out of your way, I'm sorry.
She's the deputy health officer in Portsmouth.
Okay.
And so we did have legal, early on when we talked about all of this, we did have legal consultation with legal counsel to find out, does the town even have the authority to implement this on town property? And they did say it's under the health, it is under the health, the auspices of the health department. And so there is alignment. I think that a happy medium for this would be another safety measure, right? So on the health department's forms, there could be a reminder of that, so the burden's not all on team, but it could be on the select board or application as well.
So I guess then, to be fair to you, one would ask the question, and I don't know the answer, but one would ask the question, right, you have a police department who's empowered to police, you have a code enforcement officer who is empowered to enforce code, and you have a health officer who is empowered to enforce health problems. Is a department head, whether it's you or anybody else, is a department head empowered to sort of deal with this as you suggested earlier? And Mr. Dean, I guess I would turn to you.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, other than to say at this stage, it probably sets a bad precedent. I think we have always looked at enforcement within the positions that we know can enforce, and we haven't asked anybody else to perform the duties of an enforcement agent because it's not in their job description, it's not in their training, it's not part of what they do day to day as part of the organization. So.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, right, so I come back to the language of the ordinance and the goal, and maybe it's a change in the language there, but the goal is educational.
Just so you have it in front of you.
the goal is educational, and so it's not my feeling that there is a whole lot of policing. I do take on, I'm out there when there's a wetland buffer violation. Like, I do take on some of that, but, so I guess I question, do I have the authority to do that too,
Yeah, would it be a policy or an actual ordinance?
And my question is making sure we're not putting a department head in a position where they're doing something they're not empowered to do.
Right,
So it's
yeah.
not, it's more or
Or
less
not
trying
even a
to
department head, right?
find out who should be doing it, if anyone, so. Any other questions for Mr. Ruffner before we open it up to the public?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to clarify that, this was something that came up in our meeting. So that was the one point in the presentation that, that was not my takeaway from the meeting, that event organizers would be the point person for policing this, is the word that's been going around. The permit for these vendors to sell and serve food is through the town of Exeter, not us. I mean, they're working with us to be there and part of the event. So that's my apprehension with being placed with the responsibility of implementing an ordinance where there's already a point person for what they're doing. So,
Yeah, I guess I want to follow up with that. Again, just with the town hall, because it's through Parks and Rec, but other groups come in, like photography groups and other nonprofits that have their shows there. So who, I guess, would it be Parks and Rec that would come in on every day that they were open to make sure that they weren't using these single-use plastics? So that was just something else I thought about.
And Mr. Chair, that's actually a good point that I was going to bring up as well, which is we don't have enforcement services 24/7. So a lot of these events are off hours, they're on weekends, and so, who are you going to call?
So presumably, I'm sure Portsmouth's in the same boat, and if something happens off hours, I guess I would assume that if there's somebody that has violated the ordinance, then a phone call would be made during regular hours, at which point the assistant health or deputy health officer would respond accordingly. Is that your understanding?
Right. And so I guess maybe it would be helpful to step through a violation just happened, right? What happens? Someone's out there, there's an event, someone sees a bunch of plastic bottles being sold. As the ordinance is written, they would contact me. I would then contact the vendor. It's not policing. I would contact the vendor and sit and say, these are your products. What are you trying to source? What's your price point? Just like I attempted to do for Parks and Rec. Should we find something that works? Great. We're all happy. Should someone see them at a follow-up event doing the same thing? Then we'd prepare a letter and provide them with a letter. There's no language to rescind their event permit. So they continue to sell those plastic bottles. The next time they come for a permit from the select board, you have that information in front of you and you can make the decision to deny it, should you choose.
Yeah, can I just ask a follow-up on this one? So, because James isn't here for me to ask. If James went into a restaurant and saw a violation, he would see that for himself. James can't close a restaurant down for a violation that someone reports that he doesn't see for himself. Is that correct? It becomes hearsay. So wouldn't that be a little bit of so we're relying on somebody calling you and reporting a violation and you reacting to something. We kind of ran into that with the police and the masks, right? I want this to happen. We've just got to dot all the I's and cross the T's. So,
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, from our perspective, the goal is kind of a loose implementation, lack of teeth. I mean, if you read it, there's essentially no teeth in this. It's really to force the thought, force the effort, and create those connection points that then we can meet with vendors and talk about product sourcing.
Yeah, I guess my concern here is we are also getting too in the weeds, and I understand that we're sort of digging through this and talking with all of the stakeholders here. I wish that we had worked this out a little bit, and and it might be that there is a fourth reading of this policy, but I do think the intention here isn't to stop any event or deny it, that's not the goal. My concerns, I guess, surround the Parks and Rec. I do not envision, I think that we're probably going to have some people who say, oh, well, I saw somebody bring a plastic water bottle, and then you'll get a photo, or somebody will text you a photo or email you a photo. But I don't think that the intention or any language in this ordinance is meant to really do anything.
It was a scenario, Molly.
No.
Okay.
I understand, but I don't want us to. I don't know that I even want us to enable that. Like there isn't going to be somebody going around policing this stuff. And there isn't anybody deputized to deal with it, because there's nothing that would happen anyway. So my concerns are, especially after sitting through the Rec Advisory Committee, is, the implication with, especially the cost of what turning on those water fountains are, and like how that's going to impact the rec budget. So those are the things that I think we should talk about and think through. And maybe there's a strategy about let's delay some of the implementation with the Parks and Rec. I personally do not see a problem with the events that, I think that this is really advisory and really education, and I appreciate the work that you all have done to make that language clear.
So before we deliberate amongst ourselves, I'd like, which the public hearing is still open, I'd like to invite members of the public one at a time, state your name, and everybody has an opportunity to speak.
Hello, Christopher Zigmont, 22 Crestview Drive in Exeter. I am a member of Sustainability Advisory Committee as well as Budget Recommendation Committee. Just for a point of clarity, because I also realized this third reading was an opportunity to highlight some changes that came in the ordinance, and in specific regard to Parks and Rec, and let me first also say I'm grateful that the Arts and Culture endorsed the idea and are willing to work with us, and they also see it as an opportunity to educate and move forward. And I was also pleased to hear that Parks and Rec hadn't seen this before they made their deck. What's really important to point out is in the organizational exemptions for Exeter Parks and Rec is the specific language of, I'll read number 4, which is for Exeter Parks and Recreation Department will work with the Sustainability Committee to develop a transition plan implementing acceptable alternatives as they are identified with an objective of meeting financial and sustainability goals. So there's no time horizon on that. If we achieve that next week, hooray. If we achieve that in a year and next week, hooray. If it takes us 2 years in a week, hooray. Each one of those things, there's no time horizon on that. And we understand the finances, and my hat's off to Kristen for putting together a set of scenarios for the retail sustainability and profit sustainability for the concession stand. That is just a very narrow set of options. In fact, the concern really is that they're going to continue to sell horseshoes in the age of the automobile. Plastic bans are coming. The sale of plastic water bottles, it's getting banned in a lot of places. So my bigger concern for that department is to continue to hang their future revenues on something that's sunsetting quickly around the world. We're here to help them move forward, move away from that, and put together a better profit picture and maybe a sale of different items, other things. The other thing that makes it a little bit of a red herring that I'm worried about is that there are water refill stations installed. That may have a far bigger impact on their net revenue than anything else. So they will need to look at other revenue streams or other things to retail to build a profit picture. And that's a discussion for other departments to have. But I don't want to put all of that shouldered on the almighty plastic bottle, because that's not going to be around very much longer. But again, number 4 really does stipulate that there is no time horizon, that we're going to work together with them to identify those things, and when they're mutually acceptable from a profit and a sustainability perspective, then we'll select those items. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am?
Christine Bullen and Greenlee Drive. I'm here to represent Clyde's Cupcakes, and I might be able to answer some of your food truck questions also. So for me, and I apologize in advance, coming a little late to this, I got a call on Thursday, just making me aware that you guys are having this conversation, and would somebody from the food truck like to come and represent? So here I am. So what I did was we've been doing this for 8 years, so I was able to go back about 5 years and pull up any of the contracts and the agreements I had, whether it was through catering events, through towns, through rentals, through food truck events, and so forth. And I have to be honest with you, there's only one event, and it's called the Boston Sustainability Food Truck Event, that actually has guidance this tight. And they're very specific around it. And they actually do kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing where get your food and then you're able to eat your plate. But you can't, but that's what they're saying, right? Everyone else, it really, there's some cities and some counties and some states, we operate in 7 states, that are very lax around the guidance, even around recyclable. And then there are some places like Newport, Rhode Island, when you do their music festivals, the folk festivals and the jazz festivals, where you've got 10 and 15,000 people that are going to be around, they're very clear to say, hey, no water bottles. And then you do need to follow the requirements for the state around the recycling. So yes, you can't, recycling is in the triangle, and it's a 1, yes, that goes into the blue bin, this goes into the green bin. So on the way they get around it, when you talk about like who's policing it and so forth, and who's monitoring to begin with, it generally is on a large field like that, there's a group of people who are the volunteers who understand the guidance, and they literally go from food vendor to food vendor, ask them for a piece of every one of their plastics that they're using to ensure it's meeting the guidelines. But it's also very clear in the contracts that say you will be fined, and I found some that were $250, I found some that were $500. Didn't talk about any type of repercussions in the years to come, or we're not going to work with you. It was, hey, we're coming to you, these are the guidelines, you must use recyclables, and if you aren't using those recyclables, you will be receiving a fine right then and there. You'll be able to continue the day, and you'll be receiving a fine right there of $250 to $500. So I think what you guys are speaking about, it's really, are you going to call them on it when they're there that day, or are you going to think, hey, we're just not inviting them back again, or are you going to say, hey, you have to pack up and leave? So I think for us, I just think that, it's a bit, I just think we're kind of going, and maybe I just don't know all the things that go around on, but it seems to me like we're kind of going from like 0 to 100 in the extreme of saying, hey, you know what, and no plastic, versus, hey, can we just get to the first step, which is, can we get the blue bins around so people are recycling, and you're telling vendors like Clyde's Cupcakes and the other food, I think there's 4 other food trucks that are in the parking over here, and any of the events that are occurring, that you have to use recyclable plastics. And even that's a challenge, like with plastic spoons. When you talk about, and I didn't see any price up there with moving to 100%, what was it, the spoons at the rec you guys were talking about, but they're more than double the cost, and it's going to be tough. So.
Thank you, that was eye-opening.
Kristen, I was under this, because I know Clyde's has permitted through the town for, 8 or 9 years?
Probably 6 years.
6 years?
6 years, yeah.
My understanding was that everybody that permits was sent a survey several months ago. Do you know if?
Yes.
Okay.
So I can't, like I said, I can't speak to, I just know that I got a call on Thursday from Darren saying, hey, did you see what the last meeting brought forth? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, I understand. I just want to make sure everybody that's permitted was sent.
But I think where we're a little confused, and this is the conversation I had with Clyde also, and I asked Darren on Thursday, is it interchangeable that we're saying, I feel like we're kind of talking about water bottles specifically, or Gatorade bottles, or plastic bottles, put it that way, plastic bottles. It seems like where the conversation has come, what I've heard today, and also what I've read. And then we talked about the spoon, right? And then we kind of interchanged, somebody mentioned the word bringing the blue bin out for recyclables, plastic recyclables. So to me, like, that's very different. All of my products that I sell out of my truck come in a plastic container. with the exception of one thing, which comes in a glass container. Everything else, mostly because of allergens and because of food and safety selling out of a truck, it comes already prepackaged, and then it goes out, and that's plastic. But it is plastic that is, I don't know the proper definition, but triangle 1, you know, so that it's recyclable. Yeah.
Kristen, did you or the committee want to comment? Because I think she brought up a good question. We've been talking about bottle, but single-use plastic is single-use plastic, right?
Yeah.
And I know that there are some, you had talked about prepackaged food. Maybe we could explain that a little bit again?
Yes, so just for clarity, in the definitions of the single-use plastics, they are single-use plastic bags, single-use plastic food service products, single-use polystyrene containers. Yes, it's not a recycling ordinance. We certainly hope everybody continues to recycle. Remember, at Exeter we do 1, 2, and 5, but it's the objective to get to that inevitable goal line of the cessation, the stopping of distribution of single-use plastics that we use for 10 minutes and we put it in the landfill. The other upside to this, of course, in the case of somebody like Clyde's Cupcakes, who we love, is we've got a 9-month implementation window. And one of the things we know when speaking with other retailers in town who also sell food and have it walk right out the front door is that there's a really robust list and ever-growing list of sources for every single item that is a disposable plastic has multitudes of compostable options as well. So the objective would be to work with permitted companies like Clyde's to work with them and help identify in that time frame so that we can achieve those goals. And I do realize there are going to be some things, there are going to be some beverages, there's going to be some things we won't be able to achieve right away. And again, the objective when you look at how we handle things like oversight and enforcement, it's really just to continue to work with vendors and provide, as much sourcing as we can to get to that goal line. Because really, the objective is not it's not designed to be a revenue source for the town or anything like that. It's designed to get us to a better future, and we have to work with our vendors to do that. So,
great, thank you.
Just one other thing that came up in the Arts and Culture Commission meeting, which might save everybody some time later. Instead of 9 months, you probably would want to do a year, because we've had other issues in town before where if you already have a permit, it's a contract, and people can get these permits 11 and a half months ahead of time, so you can't go back and change what has already been permitted to them. So the 9 months could put you in a tough spot on that.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the public before we close the public hearing and bring it back to the board? Renee?
Renee Allen, 185 High Street. I'm currently chair of the Energy Committee. When we do energy events, we have never given away single-use plastic. We bring maybe a couple of gallons of water, some ice, things like that, a big urn of coffee. I'm also on the Lit Fest Committee, and it's written into our mission to be sustainable and to never use single-use plastics. I just wanted to say that I agree with Chris that the refilling water bottle stations that are currently being deployed are going to really make a paradigm shift in the profit or loss of the concession stand, and I would think that would want to be implemented before the plastic ban comes in, so that the two aren't conflated together. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the Gatorade comes in little packets, and I don't know if those are available to sell at a price point by themselves, so that people could just take it, put it in their own water bottle, and maybe that could be the cash cow.
Thank you.
I can't help myself.
Hi, Chief.
Eric Wilking, Fire Chief, Emergency Management. James wasn't here to defend himself tonight, but he does work under the umbrella of public safety. I do supervise him directly. And from what I heard tonight, and thank you, Scott and Kristen, I think we're all in this together and we can all work together. I think James is not the enforcement wing that you're looking for, but if we want to talk about somebody that can share information and gather information, I think James is perfectly viable able to do that. I know there are events like the Independence Festival, the chili and beer keg. All of that is stuff that we're out there doing preemptive inspections. We're checking for heat, temperature, cleanliness. There's nothing wrong with James speaking to them about our desire to limit single-stream plastics and water bottles and report back that there are certain vendors that are still bringing plastic but wouldn't be closing them down. We've talked about that. We said that we're looking for a time frame. Somebody can reach out to them, perhaps Kristen, and say, it was reported that you were providing water in water bottles. Are you aware that's prohibited in the town of Exeter as early as, December of '22? So if that's the way you want to use James, we can work through that whole effort, whether it's an event, a team or in the town hall or up in the parkway or what's going to be left of the parkway, that all works. But I know we're not as big as Portsmouth. We don't have a robust health department like Portsmouth does. And to have him modify his schedule, which is possible for big events. I mean, he comes in on a Saturday because it's the only time we get to look at a number of things. But then there are small events. I just, bring light to the holiday block party where we all invited Santa to town and lit up the town. There were 2 or 3 or 4 food trucks out there, and they might already be pre-permitted, I'm unaware, but we didn't inspect all those food trucks, so we're not going to check and find out that they are selling plastic water bottles. But I think, just speaking to James, we can work about sharing and collecting information and passing it to the proper channels, and it would not be a burden on the health department. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
You were back in the corner there. Thank you.
I just want to share something, since we do have vendors here. I'm glad that you were able to come out. Currently, the town website has a single-use plastics section on the main page, and I've added links to 3 or 4 different sites that have sustainable sourcing, and it has the per unit price. And so maybe that's a good, whether this passes or not, if that's something you want to talk about, or for future events, if that could be a starting point. I'm happy to share that information, or feel free to identify products and then I can walk through those lists.
Great, thank you.
I have a silly question. Clyde Cupcake is usually out front. He's not in one of our parks. That's a parking lot.
He permits that space.
Right, but is this, no, let me finish though. Is this ordinance for all town property?
That's the proposal.
So it's not just the fields or the park over here or Swayze Park, it's literally
Town hall, that's
everything.
The present proposal, the wording is town property. Any other members of the public before we close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for deliberation? And we have nobody online with their hand up. Going once, twice, and I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan?
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger?
Aye.
Clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Passes 5-0. The public hearing is closed. We bring it back to the board for deliberation. Selectwoman Cowan, start with you.
Sure. I remain in support of this. I do agree about the cost of the water refill stations. I do think that I would be interested in a much more coordinated outreach and thorough outreach, which is not to say that that's not what we tried to do, but sometimes it doesn't work or doesn't happen. And so, voices get added to this at the last minute. I am reluctant to vote, I would be reluctant to vote against something like this when I do think that we could make meaningful steps soon, which could look like, okay, so we're going to go into a provisional, test year of really work with our vendors, work with our advocacy groups, make sure that Parks and Rec is on a path of, switching over products before anything really is implemented, with the understanding that nobody here is proposing policing anything. But I would be really reluctant to not do something.
Thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
It's hard to, I'm trying to verbalize what I'm thinking about this. It's obviously something that we need to have done, especially with the changing scope of the globe and the issues that we have. But I'm concerned about making a massive shift in a short amount of time without being able to transition businesses and groups to be able to follow through on what we're asking of them, and then adding to, you know, the work that then has to be done for people who have to crack down on it and say that you're not following it. So I'm in support of it. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in such a way that doesn't burden too many departments too quickly.
I would also like to change the language around exempting our emergency management folks. I think it's fine to leave it now. I do think that we should be leading the way, and even if it's a little bit more expensive, we can have boxed water or boxed, or, you know, cans of, you know, whatever that looks like. Like, I think the chief and I are gonna be in a fight at the end of this meeting. But I do think, you know, we can look at, you know, how do we reasonably and cost effectively make sure that we are behaving as sustainably as possible as well, without just passing it on to groups or, you know, vendors.
Thank you, and thank you, Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf. Selectwoman Gilman?
I support this 100%, that we want to go in this direction. I have questions that were brought up in this meeting about the permitting, changing the health officer's sign off on it to, you know, our department will not enforce, but oversee. I don't know what the words are. The changing from 9 months to a year makes absolutely sense because of the permitting that we do right now. The costing is still some trouble because, for me, because we might have people that can't afford to buy water or Gatorade if the price is going up at the pool. There's just a few details I think we need to do, but I think it'd be a great opportunity to start educating the different vendors and the different groups that come and use the spaces that we have, that this is coming down the line.
Thank you. Selectwoman Belanger?
Yeah, just, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that sometimes you get donations for bottled water, correct? Okay. So I'm going to stick to 3 high points out of all of my notes. One is definitely glad to hear, I know the chair hasn't spoken, but we're all for this. It's just figuring out the best way of going about it. So 9 months, I think is too short, so I'm happy to hear other people would support a minimum, at least a year. I have a new concern, and that's one of our local businesses, Clyde Cupcake, who actually lives in Exeter, and commented about one item that costs twice as much for them to replace. So that's a little concerning for me. I mean, a year, are we going to make one of our local businesses so that they can't actually sell their product in their own town? But I understand. We're going to look at options and hope more become available, and that if at the end of the year, I don't think we'd have to do it this year, but at the end of the year, we'd have to look at the cost of the water for the Parks and Rec, the fill stations, and consider for budget next year putting some more money into Parks and Rec to cover the costs if that becomes necessary. I just want to throw it out there that
Yeah, I agree.
that is going to be, right, because you know, they work very hard. I don't want to see them having to add overhead to hourly rate people to sell excess product. So, you know, look, we're all for this. It's just finding the best way of approaching it, so. And I appreciated the chief talking about James Murray and how he would be able to work with getting this implemented in a better way, in an efficient way, whatever. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dean, before I speak, is from management perspective, do you have anything to add?
Well, I just, you know, and I talked with legal counsel about this as well, and I think one of the issues that was brought up was, well, there were a few issues. One was just in general, the ordinance's generality, so the phrase like the use of town property, that was brought up before, it would need better definition to it. Right now, there's, you know, for example, right now it could include streets for transportation, and the ramifications of that are really unknown. And then the issue of alternatives list, present challenges to implementation and enforcement. Other concerns cited were the scope of distribution and that it's quite broad and would encompass one individual handing something to another. So if that were to happen, how would we enforce it, and would it create enforcement issues for us? So they did offer, if we provided them with an editable version of the ordinance, that they would be willing to add some things in that they felt would make it a little bit easier in terms of an implementation, which is, I'm all for that if it can be done.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yeah, I just had one more thing. We've been, the last few years, having various versions of plastics prohibitions at the state level, from everybody, everything, to, you know, single use to just straws, you know, and it's not been successful. And last year, to make it clear that you don't have to ask Wonder Bread to sell their product in a paper bag as opposed to a plastic bag, we use point of sale as the definition for where this would come into place. So we might want to put that in here for the vendors, you know, at the point of sale as opposed to the permittee or whatever, however we want to put that language in there.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll use my prerogative as a member of the board to chime in. I think you're right. The five of us hearing us talk this evening are all for this. You know, this is something that we're facing as a town, as a state, as a nation, in the world. I mean, we have to start getting better, and we can start here locally. And so I think that I know after hearing everybody speak, and I'm speaking my 2 cents, we're all in favor of taking this next step. But here's the predicament. Like Selectwoman Cowan, you know, indicated that she wouldn't want to vote against this. Well, I don't think anybody really wants to vote against reforming single-use plastics. However, there are some holes in this still. The five of us have spoken tonight. So I look at Portsmouth's policy, and we can debate the word ordinance policy. I mean, Kristen, you even interchanged the word several times during your presentation. The problem is that an ordinance means more than a policy. And I'm looking at Portsmouth's policy, and what I like about it is that it's clearly defined, but there are no time limits in it. There are no penalties in it. And I'd be willing to start there. Do we want a policy or do we want an ordinance? Well, that's something the board's going to have to talk about. I think we're taking a step in the right direction. I have the privilege of sitting with the Sustainability Committee every month, and I know the number of years you put into doing this, and the work, particularly, Kristen, in the last couple of weeks that you've done for Parks and Rec. But we still have unknowns. We don't know, when we can get product. We don't know all of the product available. We don't know how much it's going to cost in terms of the water usage. We don't know what we're going to lose in revenue, to Chris's point. We just have a lot of unknowns. So I would not want to put a time limit in this. I think that the select board, since the sustainability committee was implemented, the select board has a history of working with this committee. And I know sometimes it's been frustrating because it hasn't been at the speed in which you would have liked it, but some of the initiatives you've brought forward in the past, the select board have found a way to get there, starting with a full-time coordinator. So sometimes to make something worthwhile work, you got to take some time. I don't want to vote against this, but I don't know that we're ready to vote for this tonight. And I'm going to throw that out to my colleagues before any motions are made. I think we all want to continue working with you. I think Parks and Rec wants to work with you. I think our businesses want to work with you. I just don't want to. I don't want to prematurely vote on something because it's the third hearing, and then it doesn't work. I want this to work. So, Mr. Dean, I don't know. I believe procedurally we can do a fourth hearing. Do we need more time? I'm going to throw that out to my colleagues.
You can do a fourth, you can do a fifth. Okay. You can do as many as it takes to get you to where you want to go. You can table it until a future date.
Yeah, I don't want to table it, but
different options.
I would like to consider another hearing. I would like to give some time for Parks and Rec to look into, it's so vague though, the storage issue. We can't just say, okay, we'll buy in bulk with no place to put it and no knowledge of what it's going to take, right? I think we still need to keep going. I don't think Kristen needs to go through all of her math craziness. It's very much appreciated. You've worked very hard. Don't think it's not appreciated. We just need to, and I would like to really myself contemplate a little bit more on between the policy and the ordinance.
Well, I was just going to say, an ordinance, if we vote, and Mr. Dean, correct me here, if the select board votes to pass an ordinance, to overturn the ordinance, does that have to go to town meeting?
I believe you could rescind the ordinance that you passed, but you'd have to go back through the hearing process of having 3 hearings.
Fairly so, right. But if we started with a policy, because the town has town policies, could a policy be a start to turn into an ordinance?
A policy could be adopted by the board in one night. It doesn't have the multiple hearings process. It doesn't have a public hearing process. It's just a policy of the board.
And that would give us another opportunity. A policy is more or less a recommendation. It's not an enforceable thing. So that would give us the opportunity to see how it goes for a year or, whatever amount of time we want to give this.
And then to do an ordinance, if we wanted to do an ordinance, once we see how it works, we've got some of the questions answered, we come back for 3 public hearings with a lot more information for the public. I think if we were to vote on an ordinance tonight, if our constituents started emailing and calling, I'm not sure I could fully explain this.
Well, if we pass a policy, because I don't want to do something that doesn't mean anything. And so if there is a policy, can we put all of the work and effort that would go into an ordinance and into working with vendors and our town departments and, people who are looking for permits? Because I think that that's the most important part of this, is letting people know, we are going to have recycling bins. We are going to be expecting people to be very aware of what they're selling. That here are the recommendations for alternative things. We are looking at an ordinance. We are looking at turning this into we are going to turn this into an ordinance once we work a few things out. So just because it doesn't make sense to do something, or to say we're doing something and then what we're doing doesn't actually mean anything.
So can I throw something out there? This is how I see it, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I think if we went for the policy part of it now, it would be easier to keep making it stronger, fill in the gaps, answer the questions, and eventually, if we wanted to, turn it into an ordinance.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ready for an ordinance right now. There are too many variables, at least for me. But I think a
But
policy
we're ready to
would
move
be-
forward with.
I believe, yes, as a policy, because we could just keep improving it.
We could actually, just a recommendation, cut off 24.05 and have that all be the policy. And that's the oversight penalties. You know, the first part is the definitions. This is what we're talking about. This is what we want you to know about, and how it, you know, who it pertains to.
So on the penalties, though,
You'd think I'd have this memorized by now.
which is not penalties,
Right.
and we should use the language that's been proposed, which is oversight and enforcement, which is much better.
Right.
Excuse me.
I'm looking for what Molly just said, recycling bins.
Yeah, that's not there.
Could we add recycling bins at events?
As a town provision or the permittee?
Either way, I'm fine with either one.
Kristen, do you know if in Portsmouth, because it's not in their policy, a copy of which I have right here. So where we're looking to potentially refuse to approve a permit, I don't see that Portsmouth does that. It's not, at least it's not in their policy.
Right. So at the bottom, are you looking at the January 22 document at
It
the
was
bottom?
adopted October 7th, 2019, ratified by the Portsmouth City Council on January 8th, 2020, ratified by the Portsmouth City Council on January 24th, 2022.
Right, and so that also references Portsmouth's ordinance, and so, and again, we come back to, is it an ordinance or a policy? There's another whole document that tiers to, that addresses all of these items.
And in there's
There's enforcement, there's fines listed. I can pull it up if it's helpful.
I believe you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf, did you want to add anything since you last commented?
No, nothing to add to what's been said.
Okay, all right. If there's no other comment, discussion, then the wishes of the board?
I'm fine with the policy for right now, to keep working on it. I want to definitely keep working on this. But I also think it might be important to add recycling bin language, but I don't know if it would be town or the vendor would have to provide it. Seriously, it just popped in my head. I haven't had a chance to think that through.
So if we're adopting it as a policy, we can have conversations about, and then just, so maybe not adopt it right now. The
recycling bin part? Okay. And think about it, vet it out a little bit. Because if it's a town, they'd have to be responsible for making sure it's not compromised, right?
So do we want to work through this as a board and come back with a policy, or do we want to task our subject matter experts to take the information that we've discussed tonight and come back with a policy?
I think that's the first route to take. 'Cause to the point of education, we can refine our goal and go to the ordinance as Portsmouth has done. Once people have, told them this is coming down the line. So, tell me, whoever's getting a vending permit or a parks permit or a street permit, think about this for next year,
What kind of time, Kristen, would you and the committee need to bring back a policy?
So I guess I would welcome a few points of clarification because, so the recycling issue, what my fear is this is addressing single-use plastics, right? And trying to move away from them. The inclusion of recycle bins.
Okay.
No, that's a good,
Very good point.
Encourages that. I think we could, I stand by the fact that I believe the language is there. I do. I don't know that, yes, there are unknowns about costs from water. I don't know how that will play out. I think that it could be possible that we eliminate any time frame, and keep it an ordinance so that there is that added push, but eliminate the time frame. And
I don't think we're ready for the ordinance.
Okay. Then I guess I need additional guidance in areas of clarification, and maybe I can sit with the video and go through that. I'm just not sure what additional changes to make.
Yeah, that was just me talking. I can't talk for the rest of the board.
I think what I'm hearing is that the board would like to move forward with this initiative as a policy.
Yep. Okay.
To give the committee time, to give Parks and Rec time, other committees time, vendors time, other arts and what have you time, to work through this. And Mr. Dean, I believe the town has a structure in how we write our policies.
Yes, we have a format for that.
You could work with Kristen on taking.
Be happy to.
The bulk of this, but taking out, I just think, my concern is the time factor and when we get down to the end of this proposed ordinance, it's just too vague at this time. And I think that if we start with a policy where we're encouraging people, we're educating people, we're taking that time, it may not be 9 months. As Chris, you astutely pointed, it could take 3 years, it could take 4 years. We want to get there, though. We want to do this right. And is that what I'm hearing from?
That's how I feel.
Then to answer your question, I feel like the language is there. It's a bit of reformatting, addressing the time frame and the comments from legal. I think the language is it's there. It shouldn't take a long time.
So you meet again the first Tuesday in January, which ironically we'll be meeting as a select board that day. We haven't got to our calendar yet, but just a little sneak peek. But we're going to be meeting 4 times in January.
Okay.
So is that enough time for you to work through at your meeting in January to come back to the board in January so that we can move forward with this?
I believe so.
Is that,
yeah.
Okay. And obviously if you need more time, we want to work with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
yep.
You have 5 members of the board who have all pledged their support for this. So we want to do it right.
Yep.
Is that wishes of the board?
I'm fine with that.
Sure, and I guess point of clarity about the recycling bin, I guess I meant like whatever it is we're encouraging, so if it's not recycling because we don't want people to use single-use plastics that are, even if they are recyclable, then it's the compostable stuff. Like how are we letting people get rid of the things that we want them to, and what is the retraining aspect on that?
Yes, and I said recycling bin, and yeah. So we would consider adding something about compost, whatever. I'm sorry, I just can't say words
like
tonight.
These, I've learned from sitting through the committee, these things, can I speak?
Yeah.
So folks at home can. So something like this is truly recyclable.
Yes.
Okay, something like that is more recyclable than the plastic bottle that we're familiar with. So I think when the Sustainability Committee is talking about recycling, they're talking about things that are purely recyclable.
Right.
So, the whole point of this is to get folks away from the single-use plastic that we're familiar with, that bottle that you throw in the recycling bin, but I've learned is really not recycling. 5 times?
5%.
5%.
Ever gets recycled.
Okay, so then where do you throw these away? I mean, like, so,
Right back
okay.
to-
if we're-
I know.
Right, so we're saying
We're
not to recycle the single-use plastics, which
This
I
is part of the
understand.
Now we're talking,
But
right.
then where do we put these?
So what we're saying is single-use, even number one plastic, recycling just downcycles plastic products,
understood.
right? And so we don't, I do think having a recycle bin for those items is fine as long as we're not encouraging them for the single-use plastics.
Right, understood. And so we want, and we want to move away from this because this is more single-use than this, which you can refill.
True.
And, use a couple more times. And then even better is, your,
Bring your own.
But that can be recycled, that's aluminum.
no, right, this could be recycled, but it's a single use.
Right.
Even though it's totally recycled. But then if you commingle everything, then it doesn't matter. So like, how are we making this easy and helpful for people? And how are we provide, which we need to do and we should do.
That's why I think the making it a policy first, so that,
And this is the best. Way to go, Mr. Chair.
I guess the only comment I'd make on that, just for a point of clarity, is right now, there's no policy, and there's people vending stuff all over the place. Where do they throw it now, right? There's no recycling bins in town. As a town policy, we haven't done that in our parks and around town. We just have garbage cans. So to do nothing leaves us right where we are. When we do talk about recycling, this particular policy or ordinance, whatever we're successful in getting, is really to address single-use plastics. When aluminum cans and steel cans, soup cans go in your recycling bin, the metals are very valuable. They get separated out pretty quickly. And so the whole world of aircraft to another soda can comes out of those two things in front of the board. So whether you guys provide, language for recycling bins or not, it's a bit of a distraction from the objective to eliminate single-use plastics.
I understand.
Yep.
Understood. Go ahead.
Would it be possible to kind of dumb it down? So instead of, because my feeling is that.
Could you just step up to the mic so we can get on the video?
Say something's a recommendation, then if you don't have any ties to the community, so if I'm thinking just on the vendor side, you don't have ties to the community, and it's just going to add complexity and cost to you, you're not going to really take that recommendation, right? But can you say where we're talking about whether it's 1 year, it's 9 months or something, if the big factor is plastic bottles, and then it's the silverware and it's the straws, can we figure out what those 5 big things are or something and say, hey,
I think that's what
immediately we're going to say you are not allowed to have plastic bottles, straws, something else and something else. And then it's down the road where then you say, hey, we're also working towards this, this, and this. So we know it's no plastic bags. We know it's no. And that might be something easier for the vendors to understand, anybody who's making a decision at a park or a rec or anything like that. And it's not anything to do with the cost piece, just the simplicity of it where every single person, and then when you're talking about educating and saying, hey, you're concerned that people are going to be like taking pictures and sending them to, different people. Instead, it's just no plastic, this, and this.
It's an excellent point, and I think that's what we're saying here is that we want to take that extra time, whatever it takes, so that everybody is educated, whether it be, Parks and Rec, town employees, businesses coming in, food trucks, permittees.
Really dumb it down so everyone understands it.
I agree. I think Chris and the Sustainability Committee maybe should work on a one sheet that's very simple that becomes an addendum to any permit. So instead of it being, embedded into the verbiage of a 3-page permit, there's a visual one sheet that we can attach to our permits, everything going out that's online for the food vendors to download from the Town of Exeter website. It's attached as an addendum to that application so that the visual is there and it's clear and it can't be just sort of skimmed over in the fine print of a permit application.
Good idea. Thank you. So we'll bring this to a close. Kristen, we'll wait to hear back from you, and when you're ready, we'll get you back on the agenda.
Sounds good.
I want to thank you, the committee. I want to thank Mr. Tovey, Parks and Rec Chief. members of the Arts and Culture Commission and members of the public, this is how we get things to work. It's discussion and listening. And I'm appreciative of everybody that came up to speak tonight. Thank you. Next, we have the Arts and Culture Commission with some recommendations for the Select Board.
So just read it. Okay. So these are things that we've discussed in our recent meetings. Oh, they're talking.
Welcome.
We good? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so in recent meetings, we've been discussing some of the things that we can do, like upgrades to the, just recommendations to the town hall, because we've used it recently. Just things so it can be used all year long versus just parts of the year. So we, the members of the Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, unanimously voted to recommend that the Exeter Select Board allocate ARPA funds toward 2 urgent projects at the Exeter Town Hall. The replacement of the failing chairs on the first floor at an approximate cost of about $15,000, and the additional of a new HVAC system in the building at an approximate cost of $125,000. And that was from a bid that
That was from Jeff Beck via Greg with Parks and Rec. So these are 2 items that have been discussed, for a long time within this commission, but we've also had a lot of discussion with Parks and Rec, with the Facilities Committee, and we've sort of taken a parallel initiative approach with Town Hall. Tony Calandrello has been working a lot with a committee that was put together for Town Hall, and we're still in full support of coming up with a master plan for Town Hall that's a much bigger picture. But these are items that are pressing right now with the current use of Town Hall. We've reached out to all of the groups that regularly use Town Hall, from the UFO Festival to Musical Arts, Pine Street Players, and the chairs is a big issue. It's even a safety issue. I mean, they're pretty gnarly. So that's kind of the approach. We do now have our small fund that we can use for things like upgrades to the art gallery and smaller projects that we can take on ourselves. But these are 2 things that we really want to see implemented, and being able to use the building in the summer not only would keep the art gallery open all summer long with art shows, but would also allow this past year, between the Thursday night Parks and Rec concerts and our Tuesday night concerts that Team and Parks and Rec collaborated on in Townhouse Common, I think we had 8 or 9 canceled concerts. Where the funding still goes out, the concert is canceled. But if we had HVAC in Town Hall, concerts and summer events could be moved in there due to weather.
Okay.
Any questions on that one?
Questions for?
Yeah, I just have a clarification question. When you said you have some funds to do things for the gallery, could you give me an example of what you mean by that?
One example is lighting has been a reoccurring issue up there, that during the day it's fine, but at night the lighting isn't so great. And so that's something that we had been talking with Jeff Beck a little bit about, and he said that it probably isn't a good time to add additional track lighting on the ceiling. So he recommended that we work on supplemental lighting on the perimeter of the room, but I was in communication with the code enforcement officer for the fire department, I can't remember his name right now, and he gave us some good guidance on what would be allowable up there. So things like that, things that used to be covered in the art gallery by the arts committee, that now we have funding to take care of. So things like lighting.
Nothing would be done without approval
No, we haven't done anything yet.
No,
right,
because we're trying to learn the process. We've been in contact with Finance Department. We're still waiting to hear back on exactly.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we.
I've got like $25,000 in receipts I've already spent. I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
They have, in the small town they've been a committee, they've received several donations, and then there was also a warrant article last year that provided them with some funding, so that's the...
Yeah, I wanted to clarify the process on, when he said upgrades, I wanted to expand on it a little bit.
Okay. Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a few things.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Okay, chairs, 100% behind that one. How they're funded, even though I love those ones that exist and I want to buy one for my house. The ARPA funding, I think that's something we've talked about that before. People are throwing projects at us saying ARPA funding, and we have to prioritize that, and I don't know at what point we are with that, given our budgeting process. The HVAC, I have to say, speaking as an architect, you don't do a single service at one time. And Mr. Calandrello has the idea of a master plan, which I've been pushing for a few weeks now, because we have the lighting, we have the HVAC. The Department of Labor came in last month, and they have a whole long list of things that we need to change in that building in order to be safe, just for employees, never mind for the general public. And so those are things that have to be considered at one time. And it's frustrating, and as we went through the sustainability policy, it's grinding sausages. I am sorry, but that's what it is. So I'm right behind you. It just can't be done piecemeal. So, and the other thing, I don't know if Tony's brought this forward, but the Arts Committee did go out and get a quote for doing an assessment of the building as it is and what needs to be updated and improved. And that can be used for the National Register grant that I'm working towards, so that then we can find some federal funding. Because as it is right now, we can't, it's not an individual listed building. So, so that's going to help out with whatever work we need to do.
Yeah, and we're aware of all the things you're mentioning, and again, it's just a recommendation. We're just, and through the surveying that we did, the two big things were chairs and HVAC. So, we are looking to push, not piecemeal things that is going to backfire later with a master plan, but get things done, that maybe aren't structural to the building, but that can help the people using the building in the next 6 months or year or whatnot. So, it's just a recommendation. So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do a follow-up?
Yep.
Scott, are you looking to put posters in the town office building?
We'll get to that one.
Okay.
That's the next recommendation.
All right, sorry, I jumped ahead. Okay, thank you.
One is the 15, that's a sound number, like that's...
That's the number that Greg gave us from his research, yeah. And part of the conversation was also, after the fact, supplementing that with money from sale of the current chairs. We've talked about, doing some fundraisers and bringing some of the funding back.
So give or take $1, that 15's a good number.
That was the number that was given to us, yeah.
Understood. Melissa, what do we have left in outstanding? What's left for ARPA? I know you have that answer ready.
I do.
$736,374. Thank you. Okay. Number 2.
Okay, the second one, we, the members of the Exeter Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, unanimously voted to recommend that the town of Exeter support and promote all annual nonprofit arts and culture community events, including the Exeter Lit Fest, UFO Fest, Exeter Arts and Music Fest, Team Equinox Fest, the Independence Fest, and all exhibits at the Town Hall second floor gallery. EACAC, I guess that's what we're called now, will act as an in-kind sponsor for the purposes of getting these events posted and promoted on town-sponsored social media sites, websites, Exeter TV, and allow for posters to be hung in town buildings. And so the spirit of this is what we've been working on. One of our missions is promoting the arts holistically in town and all of the events. And so this is just kind of a preemptive measure where things have come up in the past where certain events have a town partner, and then therefore it's putting up a poster, getting promoted on XTV or, whatever it is. All we're trying to do is just partner with all of the annual nonprofit events so that as we work toward whether it's a landing page for an events website or however we're going to help promote the arts and these annual events in town, that all of these annual festivals have town partners and that we're pushing everything together at the same time, if that makes sense.
It does. So, Mr. Dean, presently with the social media policy as a committee, I know we've been through this with other committees. What parameters would they have to follow? Because they wouldn't be using the town seal, correct?
Right, they would not be using the town seal.
So how could they successfully promote these things within the structure of their committee and our social media policy?
That's a good question. I don't think I have an immediate answer to that.
I think it's a good idea. We just have to work through.
Yeah, and it's really not, I mean, there's nothing specific in mind other than, when there's the Chili Fest, Parks and Rec is the partner. And so, it's supported through some town channels. And so we're just trying to say that the Arts and Culture Commission is looking to partner with everybody in improving whatever promotion and awareness we can through whatever channels we and you guys deem appropriate. It's really nothing specific as far as, hey, we want it posted on the Town of Exeter Facebook page, whatever makes sense.
So I think on that, we'll talk about how that could work, and we can get back to you, because
because the town seal could be part of a sponsorship if the town was partnering with an organization, just like you see the economic forecast the Chamber of Commerce has, and that sort of thing could be part of this.
So we can continue talking about that. And then I think for Exeter TV, I mean, it just means it would have to be, do we currently use that to run advertising? And if we do, what does that open up to other folks that want to advertise?
Yeah, it would have,
just throwing out.
We'd have to review the parameters of the access channel and see if it fits within the four corners of that policy.
And that's my focus. Our focus was on nonprofit events. I mean, that's some of my understanding is that's one of the issues is if it's a nonprofit community event versus a business venture.
I think we just have to make sure we're not opening doors for other. Okay.
All right. And number 3, we already took care of in the last section.
Any questions for Marissa or Scott? So we can take this under advisement. We could take certainly number 2 under advisement and get back to you. We can come to either one of your committee meetings or have you back to the board, and then certainly we can consider the chairs at a later date.
Okay.
If that's the wish of the board, but thank you for the recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I jumped ahead on you there, Scott. Okay.
So, I know this is one of the moments I've been waiting for this evening. We have the Community Aggregation Committee back to present. I know we have Cliff and Lou here, and we have Henry on Zoom.
So while that's coming up, I'll just say hello, Select Board. Thank you for giving me a moment to give you an update on the progress we've made in having Exeter join the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. I'm Nick Devonshire. I live at Woodridge Lane. I guess we have to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
and I'm a member of the Exeter Community Power Aggregation Committee. I wanted to also just kind of remind you guys that the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, or CPCNH, is effectively a nonprofit utility. Right? It's a retail electricity aggregator. But the goal here in forming CPCNH and joining CPCNH is to reduce the cost of electricity for New Hampshire ratepayers, specifically Exeter ratepayers, and find more innovative ways of including more renewables in that power mix without raising costs. If we can go to the next slide, or do we have a clicker?
We did.
So I won't go through all of these slides. My comments will be about 11 minutes, but I encourage you to interrupt as I go. And that way we can answer your questions. Because ultimately, we're going to need you to approve 4 different policy documents in order for Exeter to be able to join the CPCNH launch. So if we go to the next slide. So we've taken a number of steps already. We've approved the Joint Powers Agreement. The CPCNH board has put in a lot of work. They have lined up all of their vendors and service providers, and the Exeter group here has done a tremendous amount of work as well. And ultimately, to be part of this launch, we'll have 4 policy documents that need to sign that will ultimately grant power to CPCNH and also kind of govern the Exeter's relationship with CPCNH. And there is a certain sense of urgency, so we'd ask that these could actually be approved at the January 3rd or January 9th Select Board meetings. There is a very important element of launching in the spring. It ensures we get the best possible rates. And for that reason, we're going to put a little bit of time pressure on you. So those documents have already been sent to Russ, and we're happy to, at any time, walk through them with you. We've also included some informative presentations because they're 30 pages each, they're dense. The presentations actually help you understand and answer frequently asked questions. So if we go to the next slide, I'll kind of give you a summary of what these 4 documents are and just do a little bit of a reminder of why we're looking to join CPCNH as well and what it's going to be able to achieve. So with the first one, it is the cost sharing agreement. Next slide. And here's just a summary of the 4 documents that we're going to be asking you guys to sign. The cost sharing agreement, and then the 3 other documents that sort of lay out the governance structure of CPCNH. So if we go next slide, the cost sharing agreement is the document that's actually going to delegate the authority to switch all of the, default Unitil service customers to CPCNH. And it's also going to explain and lay out the cost sharing between the different members of CPCNH. And this is probably a good time to remind you that the costs of CPCNH, the operations of CPCNH, are in no way recourse to the town of Exeter or to the ratepayers and citizens of Exeter. Any ratepayer, any citizen can leave at any time. They can either not opt in to begin with, or they can leave just the way that they would switch their default service provider now. So there's no long-term kind of impact to individual customers. But what you will see in the cost sharing agreement is that the commitment that we are making is that we won't switch our default service provider en masse for 3 years. So the same way with the stroke of a pen, we're going to switch everyone over to CPCNH. We're committing that, hey, en masse, we won't switch everyone over to some new service provider for 3 years. But any individual customer can switch at any time without penalty. And that's what you'll find mostly in the cost sharing agreement. If we go to the next slide, in the energy risk management policy, you will find you'll find essentially the process by which we strike the hedges and procure power that allow us to offer rates at below the Unitil default service rate. So this is probably a good time to remind people and explain how do we actually procure power cheaper than Eversource and Unitil. And the answer is that the CPCNH can enter into long-term hedges where the default utilities can only hedge up to 6 months at a time. So that ability to enter into long-term hedges, the ability to say, hey, I'll buy power from you for 20 years, allows you to get cheaper rates. And additionally, and actually more importantly, CPCNH can enter into those hedges at any time. whereas the default service providers, the utilities, they have a very narrow window when they're out there procuring energy. So if you can only shop for Christmas presents the week of December 17th, you end up paying a lot more. To be able to buy, selectively whenever you want lets you reduce those costs. And so in the energy risk management policy document, you'll kind of see, all right, here are the hedging strategies we're going to use. Here are the guidelines as to how much and how little we'll hedge to make sure that we're always able to provide rates that are below the Unitil default service rate. And in the next slide, and on the retail rates policy, they'll actually explain the structure of the rates. I can tell you right now that, so I've done most of my work with the Energy Risk Management Committee. I'm a bit of an energy nerd. It's what I do for a living. And our procurement provider, Ascend Analytics, has basically found that we can provide a 5% discount to the Unitil service rate consistently, through ups and downs in the markets, and still build up a reasonable level of financial reserves for CPC&H so that we can weather anything. The retail rates document is where they'll lay out, exactly how that 5% comes to be chosen. If it were to be adjusted to 4% or 6%, how would that be done? And in that document, there will also be a decision that you guys have to make. And if we go to the next slide, so there will be a decision that you guys have to make, and it's ultimately what is the menu of options that you offer to the customers of Exeter, and most importantly, what is the default service class that you're going to offer. And there are effectively two options. The Granite Basic option, they've called it, is just meeting the state renewable portfolio standard, 23% renewables, or this Granite Plus, which would be just 10% more renewables in the mix. A number of communities are opting for the Granite Plus, it seems like. Initially, we found that the Granite Plus would be about $1 to $2 per megawatt hour more. That's 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour, or it's a 0.5% increase in what the rates would be otherwise. Ultimately, though, the Exeter Community Power Aggregation Committee, we're not an elected body, and so we don't feel comfortable making that selection. We will leave it to you guys. But we would advise offering the full suite there, because some people might decide that, hey, I'm willing to spend, whatever it costs, and there'll be guidance to have 50% or 100% renewable energy delivered to me. If we go to the next document, the financial reserves policy. So you heard me say that we should be able to offer a 5% discount consistently to the Unitil default service rate and still build up a steady bank of reserves. Eventually, that bank of reserves will be met, and we should hope to meet it in 3 to 5 years. Once that bank of reserves is met, there's actually excess reserves, and the financial reserves policy kind of governs what do we do with those financial reserves. This is why a lot of towns have actually been so excited about this, because it allows them to either distribute those funds back to ratepayers or to do projects, whether it be locally sourced renewable projects that further reduce costs or sustainability projects. But a lot of towns are really excited about this. I can tell you that the forecast is, if everything were to go according to plan, in approximately 5 years, we would reach the level of reserves that we're looking to hit. And after that, you could take that 5% discount and make it into something as sizable as 20%, depending on the economics of the market. That's if you were choosing to kind of send those reserves back to Exeter ratepayers, or you could decide which governing body in Exeter would be allocating those funds. That's ultimately up to the select board or a governing organization here to decide, but I just wanted to highlight it as the driving reason why a lot of these towns are signing up, and ultimately, to read about the nitty-gritty details of how those are allocated, you'll find that in the financial reserves policy. And if we go one more slide, I'm not sure, Great, and so that's it. So those are the 4 documents. 3 of them have already been approved by the CPCNH board. The cost sharing agreement is up for approval later this week. We don't expect any significant changes, but if there are any, we'll send the final execution version. Again, the group is hoping to launch this coming spring, and we're hoping that Exeter will be part of that launch.
Terrific. So Nick, if I understood you correctly, if you just let us know whether it's the 3rd or the 9th, we'll get you on the agenda.
Does anyone have some recommendations on which would be better?
I guess I would say it's really the board's call when you feel like you're ready.
One of the 2, but there's a lot of material to look at. So.
It's 70 pages of dense governing language. Town council might want to review this. We didn't want to rush you and say, hey, crack these books over Christmas break.
Are you more comfortable with the 9th?
I am, because I think to get all the information into us next week, and then have the proper time to review it and so forth, I think the 9th makes more sense.
And that works for you?
I think it does. Yep.
Okay. The 9th.
Great.
But while you're here, are there any questions for Nick?
I will say, as the alternate to CPCNH representative from Exeter, that I give Nick so much credit for sitting through hours and hours and hours of those meetings to go over these documents. They're very long meetings, and I'm glad he's there because I have missed a few.
It just showed me what it takes to be a municipal servant, and that I might not be cut out for it.
Just stick with it a little while, okay?
But it is, to me, it's a very exciting opportunity to do something very interesting with energy, and most importantly, to just cut costs. I mean, we're about to hit 33 cents a kilowatt hour for default service, which is fantastic for the company that I'm a part of, but that's got to be painful for folks that are hanging Christmas lights and everything else.
Well, we also appreciate the fact that in between all of you, when you've come before us in 10 minutes, you can make us understand what you had to sit through for 3 or 4 hours. That's greatly, greatly appreciated. This is exciting.
One of the other things, too, that we can be noted for is that there are, you have a list here, 16 or 26 towns in the whole of Cheshire County that are looking to go through this and become members of CPCNH and get the aggregation of electricity in their places. And Exeter was one of the, we're number 3 there, but we were one of the first communities to buy into this concept and get all our paperwork in place. And thanks to you guys for signing the amendments that have come before us. So we're in the first tranche of towns that are going forward with this. They went through the PUC process and was fairly smoothly since Lebanon went first, and they got all the questions.
It's also been amazing to see how excited some of the companies are that we're partnering with. So Ascendant Analytics is doing the procurement. In my professional job, I use them on analysis in my battery storage investments. They are the smartest guys in the room. Mm-hmm. And their CEO has been on calls with us just saying, I want to see more stuff like this happen. It exists in California. It exists in Massachusetts. I'm excited to see it in New Hampshire. And then Calpine is being very generous in terms of actually giving us funding, and they'll be the ones that are ultimately fielding the phone calls when people say, I don't understand, what is this part of my bill, and that sort of thing. So folks really just want to see this exist in New Hampshire. It's been great.
Terrific. Well, thank you all very much. We'll see you the 9th.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know we had Henry and Stephanie were online. Do you want to thank them for being there?
Can I make a comment?
Please do.
Just quickly again, Renee, Chair of the Energy Committee, which is a sister committee to the ECPAC. I am not on that committee. But I would like to state that recently we have been contacted by people and have met with people over coffee just casually from Stratum Brentwood, Kensington, and they are all very interested in developing community power in their own towns. There are actually 2 towns are forming energy committees specifically for the region. Like they didn't have energy committees, but they're forming them so they can take on community power. So I think it's a real winner.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's really exciting.
It is exciting.
It would be nice.
It's a good group of towns to be with, I would say.
It would be nice if Rockingham County would get on there.
Yeah. You get on that at the State House.
I'll do that.
All right.
Oh, enjoy your reading.
We will. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Sharples. I guess you're going to talk about the facilities condition assessment contract.
Proposed motion. Put it in there.
I thought you did. You did.
No.
You don't like that one? Okay.
That's facility advisory.
Oh.
They adopted with.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good night, Cliff.
Have a good holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So as most of you know, the Facilities Advisory Committee worked with town staff, and they issued a request for proposals to conduct a facilities condition assessment after the voters approved a warrant article in March 2022, this past March. Last March, they approved $45,000 warrant article. However, we went out to bid shortly thereafter, but we had to reissue it because all our bids came in that were, the minimum bid was double of what we had, up to like $400,000. So the Facilities Advisory Committee revised their request for proposals, made it a little bit, clearer, resent it out. And we received 6 proposals ranging in price from $41,485 to $212,400. And I attached a list of the firms and their respective prices, proposals. So the FAC, the Facilities Advisory Committee, I'll just say, FAC reviews the proposals at their November 10th meeting. They decided to interview Bureau Veritas, ISIS, and Roth IAMS. And all 3 interviews were held at the end of November. The interview panel consisted of Chris Weeks, the FAC chair, Julie Gilman, a select board rep, Mark Layton, an FAC member, Doug Eastman, the building inspector, and myself. The panel unanimously recommended Bureau Veritas to conduct the facilities condition assessment for $45,000. The main reasons Bureau Veritas was chosen were they were well qualified to conduct the assessment. They're third-party representatives, so they don't do any design work. In other words, they don't profit from any recommendations that they make. They don't come back in the back end and say, okay, we recommend doing this. We provide design services. So they're completely an independent kind of third party. They will conduct a level 4 analysis of all systems. I won't get into what those mean, but the others were level 3, some level 4. They were the only firm to provide level 4, which is more detail on all the building components that they'll look at. The price included data migration to the system, transferring all their data that they create into our database of our choosing, because we use PeopleSoft GIS, but they also have an Access database, and their price includes ongoing access to the database. Most others, like one was like a $10,000, annual licensing fee and so forth. They include their software. We can use it as long as we'd like to, if we don't want to use it in our database, but we can choose. Their price included all travel, reimbursement, et cetera. It's a fixed fee. And while the other firms provided some of these, we felt Bureau Veritas had the most added value. But as you'll note in the attachment, Bureau Veritas proposed a fee of $49,350. However, during the interview, the panel asked if they were willing to conduct the assessment for $45,000 without a reduction in the scope of work, and they agreed. So we only had $45,000. They were willing to do it. We asked them that. So after the interviews, is I conducted reference checks. I got contacted 3 other references, all positive responses. They were all very happy. No one experienced any issues with the company. So I would, at this time, if approved, I do, because there was a concern, there was talk at the FAC about who's going to implement this, because what I will do, if it's approved by the select board, I'm going to get it to contract. But I did speak with Jeff Beck, the maintenance supervisor, and he is very enthusiastic about this project, and he has agreed to shepherd it and be the point person for the town, because there's going to be a lot of logistics about getting the firm here, having the access to all the buildings, showing them around, showing them where all the important components of each building are. So there's going to be a lot of work and then after implementation, and he's excited about that. He thinks it'll help him with his maintenance budget and so forth, and capital improvement planning for the facilities. So he's more than willing to take this on, provide follow-through and implementation. So hats off for Jeff for agreeing that. So I'm here tonight to I forgot. At the time of my memo, I didn't go to the FAC. They hadn't had a recommendation, but they met Friday night, and they moved to recommend to the select board that the town contract with Bureau Veritas to conduct the facilities condition assessment for a not-to-exceed price of $45,000, and that was unanimous. And I provided a motion to accept their recommendation and authorize the town manager to execute the contract. So I'd be happy with that. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has about it.
I just want to say kudos on the negotiations and getting them down $4,000.
Yeah, thanks.
Good work.
That's what I do, yes.
And you do it well.
I'm excited.
Any questions or comments? Or
I think they had me when they said travel is included. They're a national firm, so they have offices, and they'll fly somebody who's a mechanical specialist in from California just to review our mechanical system.
Wow.
Well,
it's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting. I didn't really know what
to work within the parameters.
Yeah, didn't fully know what a facilities condition assessment was until I went through this process, and I think it's gonna be a very good project. I mean, they're gonna basically go from the roof to the basement and look at everything except furniture that's not built in, walls. Every unit's useful life of the units, and make their own predictions about how well it's been maintained, what they think the useful life is, and a cost for replacement. So it's going to be I think it's going to be really good for our facilities planning.
Dave, did you mention the schedule and the deliverable?
The schedule is no, I haven't yet. They're looking at sometime after the new year, so it'll be complete. I think they're like 12 to 14 weeks from start to finish. So they'll definitely be done by summer. They'll be this spring, like late winter or spring, they'll be finished. Because they said they had availability, I think, I actually remember, like maybe late January, February, around there to start. And then it would be like a 12 to 14 week process.
Depending on the weather.
Depending on the weather, because they do, like unlike a couple other firms that they didn't mention, they do the site as well. They walk around the grounds and the site and look at anything on site, and they prefer to be snow-free.
unless there are any other questions or discussions, we have a motion here. I'd entertain a motion that the Select Board accepts the recommendation from the Facilities Advisory Committee to contract with Bureau Veritas to complete a facilities conditions assessment as specified in the town's request for proposal dated August 19, 2022, and to further authorize the town manager or his designee to execute any documents and take any and all actions necessary to complete the project not to exceed in the amount of $45,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan. Aye. Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
Clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Dave, once again.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
We have our third and final reading for the town ordinance for the sewer regulations update. At this time, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
As a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan. Aye. Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Public hearing is open. And it seems like every time this discussion item comes up, the public is left. So we will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan?
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger?
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes. The public hearing is closed. There isn't anything to read. You've already read it.
I've read it, and now it's not highlighted anymore. So it was section 15.
Are there any questions?
No.
Or any comments? Or if not, then I would...
My only comment is that it just brings our regulations up to date with state level. That's it.
So I would entertain a motion. I would entertain a motion to accept, to approve the updated sewer regulations to the town ordinance.
So moved.
Mr. Dean, do we need a, second? And then,
No, well, go ahead.
do we need an effective date?
They're typically, if you don't vote, they're a specific date, they're typically valid a week after adoption.
Okay.
I'm happy to amend my motion if you want.
I have no suggested dates.
Okay. All right, just checking. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan? Aye. Selectwoman Belanger?
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Next, we have Mr. Stevens to talk about the FY22 encumbrances, I believe.
Good evening, everyone. Corey Stevens.
Thank you for your
Finance
patience
Director.
this evening.
What's that?
Thank you for your patience this evening.
Oh, no problem. So I trust that you all received the schedule of encumbrances. I guess if there are any questions, please let me know. And we've got support for each of the requests. Requests are about maybe a couple $100,000 more than they were last year. Perhaps due to supply issues and just timing of getting vendors and services and materials in the door. We find ourselves with a bit higher encumbrance level this year than last.
Corey, just for the sake of my eyesight, because this is really small print, could you read that grand total?
Grand total, $1,151,437.92. 1151437.92.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? No?
No, these are all ones that we knew were coming down the line for.
Mr. Chair, if I could jump in just for a minute. So late today, the assistant town manager had a meeting with the sewer department and talked about the notion of a septage facility and some of the work that we would need to do to upgrade our facility to meet DOL standards and other things. And so what we'd like to do is add $155,000 from sewer capital outlay to the list for a possible encumbrance, and the contract for that would be, we anticipate it would be Wright Pierce that we would contract with to do that work, and that's design work and bidding work and construction admin services on a septage facility.
Okay. Do you have an updated total then?
An updated total?
Was that built into this?
No, it's not built in, it's not on the list, so it would be added to this list.
What is the total?
So if we could have the total?
Right.
I thought you guys were going to race for a minute.
No.
I'm going to either do it in my head or he's going to do it on his phone.
My money's on you, Corey.
Yeah. Right.
Is that yours? I was daring.
So the new total would be $1,306,437.92.
1,306,437.92?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to authorize the Town of Exeter 2022 encumbrance requests for the year ended 12/31/22 in the amount of $1,306,437.92.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Corey.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Mr. Dean.
You're welcome.
Our last discussion item is just another review of the budget, and I see that Mr. Kelly has walked in, the chair of the Budget Recommendations Committee. And I know we've had a long agenda. I don't know if there are any specific budget items the board would like to discuss this evening, or if not, we'll have 2 opportunities in January before the budget hearing, but I would open it up now if anybody has anything to discuss. Mr. Dean?
One thing we've done in the past is for the board members that want to discuss items but maybe haven't had a chance to do the deep dive into the budget all the way through yet, is to send them our way at the town manager's office, and we can compile a list.
Okay.
And I can bring that list to the meeting on the 3rd or the 9th. So we can have some further discussion about it, just an option for you.
No, I think that's a good option, and I was going to say that we are going to meet 2 weeks in a row before the budget hearing. We'll get to the calendar at the end of the meeting, but I would ask that between now and January 3rd and 9th, if you haven't gone through the budget, if you can go through and either both bring questions to Mr. Dean's attention or bring them to the board, and we could discuss the budget twice before the budget hearing.
Could I give the board a heads up?
Please.
That, so at the Conservation Commission meeting, there was some concern, one of the budget recommendation meetings, there was a question about our current inventory on conservation land, and that they felt that there might want to be a future discussion on how much we have and how much more we might want to add. Conservation Commission watched and listened and wanted to do a presentation. I think promoting more conservation land. I did ask them to reconsider doing it at deliberative session since I didn't feel that was the right venue. We can't really do anything at line items, so they are probably going to come to the select board.
Okay.
And I just asked that they reached out to the chair who does the agenda.
Happy to have them.
And they're going to have just a short presentation with a few bullet points of, I should say a few pages, maybe a page to 2, just to talk about the benefits of our conservation land, so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a draft town warrant in the packet this week as supplemental, so that's another thing, if you could take a look at that and make any comments. We do have 2 articles that have been put into that town warrant. One is would call for the appointment of the treasurer as opposed to electing the treasurer, and there are a number of reasons that the finance director and I have talked through as to why that might be a good idea for continuity purposes and so forth. Among other things, and our current treasurer is actually interested in that, and she is up for re-election this year, so if the appointment were to take effect, she would be elected to the office, and then a year from that, we would be able to make an appointment of that office from there on out. And then the other article on the warrant so far is the cable TV fund. So we've crafted some language. Corey assisted with that, and looking at the a percentage. Obviously, that would be going back to the cable TV fund in a greater amount than it is today. The way we crafted the article was basically leaving it open-ended, and leaving it up to the select board. But you may want to have further discussion about that. You may want to include a number, but that's a starting point to have that conversation.
Okay. Thank you. So I think for our homework for January 3rd, we've got multiple copies of the budget. We now have a copy of the draft warrant. Let's be prepared to have that. Mr. Dean, we'll have that up as one of our first discussion items on the 3rd. Bob, since you're here, please.
Thank you, Nico. Bob Kelly, Columbus Avenue, Chair of the Budget Recommendations Committee. Russ had alerted me to the packet contents of the town warrant, the draft town warrant. And on behalf of the BRC, I'd like to suggest maybe a couple of modifications to some of the items for the town manager and your board's review and consideration. Okay. The first one would be the bond article number 1 on the police station and fire substation. There was a lot of discussion on what actually would be a part of that. If you recall, the original analysis was for about a $15.9 million proposal. And during the BRC presentations and based on feedback from some public meetings, including at this board's meetings, there was a real interest in adding some net zero energy considerations, which altered the potential price to $16,300,000 as presented in the warrant. So I, and the committee thought that having that in there as part of the warrant article would be beneficial, just to show the community that these considerations at these companies. So after the word Continental Drive, so second line, into the second line, construction of a new police station and fire substation on Continental Drive, and then an addition that would say with net zero energy components, and to authorize issuance, blah, blah, blah. So, and you can wordsmith it how you want, but just to get the net zero energy aspect into the warrant article, again, to show good faith that we listen to some of the public considerations. The next one would be on page 2, down at the bottom, bond article number 5, groundwater source development. As you know, the town's search for groundwater and our interest in diversifying our water utility goes back to about at least 2014. Well, actually, it started in the 70s, but in 2014, we built the groundwater plant, brought it online in 2015, and last year, well, actually this year, but last year's warrant approved $1 million to continue the source water development to, again, keep diversifying our water sources. So we would like to add in on that second line, let's say a recognition that it's more of a continuing effort, not, because the existing line says for the purpose of developing groundwater sources. We've already embarked on that road. So what we'd like to do is, instead of saying developing, so say for the purpose of continuing efforts to develop groundwater sources. Again, acknowledging the commitment that the town has made for the past at least 7 or 8 years, and the commitment that the voters made this past March by approving $1 million. This $500,000, as we discussed earlier, is to sort of continue the momentum should things fall our way next year. And then the last one on page 3, bond article number 6, the Court Street Sewer Pump Station. This is fairly simple. In the second line, between the word replacing and equipment, I think it'd be appropriate to put in the word aged there, so it'd be for the purpose of replacing aged equipment. A lot of times we replace vehicles and equipment just because they've ended their useful life. They're not necessarily old. The equipment in this facility is, some of the equipment that we're looking at replacing is well over 20 years old, well past its useful life, and accidents waiting to happen. So we want to make sure that the intent of what the water and sewer divisions, as well as the BRC, the contemplations that we went through. So those are our recommendations. Appreciate the town manager alerting me to the details of the draft warrant, and would again suggest your consideration of those changes.
Thank you. All good suggestions. Mr. Dean, you got those?
I did.
Good. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, moving to regular business, Madam Clerk, we have the timber tax, a solar exemption, and a veteran's credit.
Uh-oh, I blew by it.
I've done that twice tonight. My paperwork got all messed up.
No.
Oh.
All right, Mr. Chair, I move to approve a tax exemption for map 71, lot 119, in the amount of $5,502.66 for tax year 2022.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve a solar exemption for MAP 86, Lot 66, Unit 1, in the amount of $12,000 for the tax year 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. One more.
And I move to approve a veteran's credit on MAP 47, Lot 8, Unit 2445, in the amount of $500 for tax year 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
And clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Dean, we have one permit from Eversource. This is a temporary access permit.
Correct. And no issues with this. We're happy to recommend it be approved.
I get this so messed up.
I'm just looking at what the area was.
61 Newfields Road.
Yep. So I would entertain a motion to authorize Eversource Energy a temporary access permit for the property of 61 Newfields Road in Exeter, New Hampshire. It's described in Book 3764, page 2337 of the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds, subject to the following terms and conditions as listed in the permit.
I'll second. Also moved, sorry. Brain tonight.
Do I have a second?
Second.
There's motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
She said aye.
Okay. Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Belanger.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We have a vacuum that's overtaking some of our
We're almost
sound.
done.
We're almost there. And Mr. Dean can give us his report after he closes the door, halfway, so it's still open to the public. We're ready for you, sir.
All right. So I have a few things tonight to report on. One is we had an issue earlier this year, if you recall, where we had a resident come in and discuss late payment charges with the water department.
Yes.
And water bills. We did go through a process with our new deputy tax collector, water sewer collector, and we were able to resolve that issue. So I just wanted to report to the board that that's been solved and we don't have the issue.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. And wanted to recognize Melissa Heights, our new deputy, who did a great job digging into that issue and assisting on that.
Great. Many thanks.
Paul Vlasic is, in the absence of Jen Perry, has retired, as we all know. So Paul Vlasic graciously accepted the role of acting public works director. So if you're wondering who is in charge in the department right now, it is Paul.
Okay.
So we've been working together on different projects while we continue our search for a director, and we're in the process right now of checking references on one of the candidates. So
wonderful.
We may have something soon on that.
Thank you, Paul.
Swayze Parkway affidavit has been forwarded for signature. So the board directed at the last meeting after the public hearing that be forwarded on. So the plan would be to do that unless there was any objection from the board.
Were those several parts revised and reworded?
They were.
Corrected? Okay.
Yes.
Do we get to see them?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can circulate it back out for review.
Please do.
Yeah.
I think it's online, one of the packets.
No, it wouldn't be. We just asked for some changes. The new draft wouldn't be online in a packet. right?
Well, would it be, no, but it would be put on the website, right?
The latest version we got via email, I'll have to check to see if it's reached the website yet.
So to Selectwoman Gilman's point, the transparency will be that it will be posted on the website once it's...
I know there are 3 packets listed on the select board, and one of them was the Cypress issue. I didn't read it myself because I didn't have time. So I know it's not in our packet, but it's not in this, but there's an additional packet.
But there were other things that were asked to be corrected. But that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see it as a whole.
Yeah, well,
Right, and after the public hearing, council took who was here, took those changes and reworded.
So we had a public hearing as regulated.
Correct.
And the corrections were not changing the content. It was just like correcting Mr. Swayze's name.
Right.
Right. So it wasn't, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, if we were changing the content, but we didn't, we were just correcting typographical errors.
Where the road ran instead of bordering.
So where it's not changing the content, if you just circulate it for the board to review, right, we can individually okay it with you, and then it goes on the town website for the entire town to see.
Yes, you're just finalizing something that's already been worked through.
Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just feel comfortable seeing it.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, very good. We did get notice from the New Hampshire DOT, via a letter, that our bridge aid is coming, so it should be here this week. That's $301,000, and the intent is that we will use that to offset the over half the cost of the Linden Street Bridge repair that's going on the warrant. The town offices will be closed this Friday, 12/23. That's the Employee Appreciation Day the board approved. And then Monday is the celebration of Christmas holidays, so we'll be closed on Monday the 26th, and also closed on January 2nd, which is Monday.
Okay.
So it's upcoming closures. Trash pickup on the week of 12/26, where Christmas is on a Sunday, is on time. So there's no change in the trash collection schedule that week.
Okay, thank you for that important update.
Yes. The Salem Street project, an update on that. That Park Street is supposed to be paved by the end of this week. That's what's been planned. I know if you've been out in that area, you've probably noticed they've moved equipment off to the side and so forth. They've been working diligently on the drainage, which is very deep out in that area. The crews are also working on sidewalks on Salem and Oak Street. We are continuing design work on the Webster Avenue Pump Station project, so that's being worked on through DPW. The Siphons project is underway. They've begun that project. They're out staging out at the Duck Point area, and should see more activity on that soon. And then I am working with the finance director on submitting a review for our bond rating. We both feel that it's time for us to have Moody's relook at that and hopefully get an upgrade with the interest rates rising. It would be great if we could achieve that. And then the last note I have is the water sewer rate study is underway.
Okay.
I have a quick question, specifically about the rental assistance program ending at the end of the year. Has there been talk or outreach or guidance from the state or anything? And if that has not happened, could somebody start thinking about it? Because it's ending and it's cold and
there is a temporary assistance program that will go through the CAP program. It's an assistance program that we are part of when we can request funds for, and it's just like our welfare department where it's not limited to electricity or whatever. It can be also used for rent. I don't know what the qualifiers are for. You have to have been a CAP recipient before that. So it's still limited, and it's only for a year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be impactful, and I was speaking with a friend from Legal Aid who are anticipating a number of challenges and not being able to keep up with the demand.
So we'll get you an answer on that, a more holistic answer than a short answer.
I know they changed the income level so that it used to be up to, if you're a family of four making up to $60,000, then you could apply for this benefit, and they raised it up to $75,000 for a family of four, so that more homes can be included in the program. But that's it.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Dean?
Nothing from me.
Okay, Select Board Committee reports. Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf, I'll start with you.
So the updates that were brought to the table today by the Arts and Culture Committee are pretty accurate, so there's nothing more to add to that.
Great, thank you very much. Selectwoman Cowan.
I think that we had a meeting since the Rec Advisory Committee happened, and you all have heard about it anyway. And then the Communications Advisory Committee was canceled because of a lack of quorum.
We got to do something about that.
Yeah.
Selectwoman Gilman.
I had only the Facilities Committee since our last meeting, and you heard what we did and produced there. Coming up, I have to tell you that there is a Heritage Commission that has been canceled because of a lack of quorum, and our HGC is canceled because we had no applicants, so that's it.
Thank you.
And so everyone's having happy holidays on those.
I hate it when it comes to me. Okay.
Wait a minute, I have one more thing.
Oh, good.
I did ask, actually I had an Energy Committee meeting, but you heard too what we went through there. But one of the things I asked was for the committee members to look through the list of proposed legislation called LSRs, or Legislative Service Requests. And boy, they got right on it, and I got in 24 hours the list of bills that they're interested in taking a position on. And there are over 800 bills now. There'll probably be a few more before January. And so I wanted to ask every committee to do that. My committees aren't meeting. So I'd ask the public to go to gencourt.gov and
gencourt.state.nh.gov.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You should know too, because you're looking at it. I don't look at it, I just have a button that I click. So, and you can search by word. There's a proposed LSR language link that you can choose, and it just pops up with all these numbers. And you can, right now you can only read the titles of the bills. You can't read the bodies of the bill. So you can type in a search for the word energy, and they all come up, or housing, or funding, or something like that. So if anybody sees something like that, please let me know.
Excellent. Thank you. Selectwoman Belanger.
My turn. So Planning Board, there was a site walk on December 6th for Beach Hill Road. It's case number 2214. There was some discussion on it for December 8th. Ran into some issues, so that's coming up again this Thursday. I'm going to skip over some stuff here. There was, so that ended up being the only one heard that night because there was a scheduling issue or something with the other applicant. Dave Sharples just talked a little bit about the proposed zoning amendment. Then I had a Housing Advisory Committee meeting on December 9th. We had a discussion on affordable housing or attainable housing. We're coming up with other terms, and kind of a then and now comparison. So there's going to be a data analysis done so that people can understand maybe with that data the issues that we're having. We're also going to look into the future discussion to include what parcels of land in Exeter may be considered for attainable housing projects. We've scheduled a tentative field trip for May 12th to go to Dover and Durham, New Hampshire, to look at what Maggie and John Randolph, who are Exeter residents, have been doing with their housing projects. We discussed our goals for 2023 in anticipation for our passing our policy here at the select board level. I gave them a heads up. We looked at our calendar for next year. We did end up moving our November meeting because of Veterans Day weekend. And Conservation Commission, they had their first non-public. It was fun. They did great. There was a conceptual discussion for construction of a parking lot and new building at the Volvo dealership on Portsmouth Ave, preliminary wetland function and value assessments and the impacts. There was a few concerns. One was about the amount of additional parking that's being conceptually proposed. I don't know how else to put that. And there's a deep slope out back, and this, like, they're talking about a 20-foot retainer wall. So that, and then I already talked to you about the deliberative session discussion we had. Rain's Farm contract was signed by Nico. So that's going to start for the repairs for the barn. A few items will be done later because of the cost compared to what was passed for front. Trails were the kiosk and signs for Brookyard Pond, Grisette Mendez Conservation Area, Smith Page, Henderson Swayze Town Forest, and Oakland Town Forest region. A few people have gotten lost and our signs aren't really great, so they're trying to do better with that. Outreach for a future snow event, possibly in March. And net zero approach was also brought up for the proposed police station with the fire department substation. That same night for sustainability, for the conservation, I was invited to an Exeter Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan Focus Group discussion at 4 o'clock. I had 3 meetings that night. So the focus group was talking about the strengths for walking and bicycling, connectivity gaps or hazard areas, networking, prioritizing crosswalks. There was some discussion about crosswalks near our parks and why we put parks and no crosswalks. But Nico, I called Nico and he's going to follow up with that because he's had this discussion with other people. So he was the best one for that one. About how to maybe do something better with the core downtown area. They felt that Epping Road and Exit 9 was a big problem for bicycles, a danger. Because Kristen was at the Arts Committee, I walked down with her and listened to that part of the conversation before she and I had to come up for conservation. And I'm done.
Thank you.
Very good. You sure you want it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The only meeting I had was the Sustainability Advisory Committee, which you heard about tonight. Just a
Thank you
little
for
bit.
doing that on our agenda.
And then the River Advisory Committee, at the request of Mr. Vlasic, canceled their December meeting because there really wasn't any reason we're going to get back in January. Correspondence, I have an email from Megan Rafferty letting us know that Mr. Don Clement has been reappointed to a 3-year term on the Exeter Squamscott River Local Advisory Committee. So we thank Mr. Clement for volunteering for that. Several emails, some of them we've seen before for the single-use plastic, and we appreciate folks writing in. We also have a letter from New Generation thanking us for our gift of $500. An update on the Salem Street Area Utility Replacement Project Neighborhood Meeting, which is going to take place tomorrow at 6 o'clock at the Exeter Town Library. We have important town meeting calendar dates from the NHMA, and then finally, the Town of Exeter calendar with the holidays, the budget and election filing deadlines, and the budget hearing, which is the 17th of January, deliberative session February 14th, and of course the election Tuesday, March 14th.
We will add Juneteenth to that as well. That was inadvertently omitted, so we'll add that to the calendar.
Thank you.
And redistribute.
Thank you. Finally, speaking of calendars, again, our board calendar, this will be our last meeting of 2022, unless something urgent comes up. But moving forward, we will meet on January 3rd, which is a Tuesday, and that's due to the January 2nd holiday. We will meet January 3rd, Tuesday, in this room, and Mr. Dean, if we can make sure sustainability can relocate to the wheelwright. We will meet the following Monday on January 9th, and that's because, again, we want to have 2 opportunities to go over the budget and the warrant article drafts. We'll have the public budget hearing on Tuesday, January 17th, and then we will meet again on January 30th, and deliberative session will be February 4th, that's Saturday. The following week, again, we will not have a select board meeting, but we do have the all-board meeting scheduled for February 8th. So with that, this has been a very long meeting. Appreciate everybody's patience and time.
Thank Pam for all the work she did on the water trough.
Yes,
Just did
go ahead. Selectwoman Gilman, you were there. I had the flu, so I did not make it. Did you want to?
On the which thing?
The water trough.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, that was fun. It's installed over on Front Street. There's a plaque thanking the Webbs for donating our old pictured watering trough, which apparently will be used as a planter in the warmer months.
Yeah, and Pam did a lot of work on getting it, so thank you to Pam for...
Upcoming is the old bell from the courthouse, the former courthouse, or burnt courthouse.
All right, thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so with that, unless there's anything else, again, for those celebrating Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah. For those celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. For those celebrating a Happy Kwanzaa, Happy holidays to all. Be safe.
And happy
be healthy.
New Year.
We'll see everybody at the new year.
New Year.
And Selectwoman Roundtree, thanks for hanging in there with us tonight. Feel better.
Thanks.
With that, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
You talk so fast.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.